Okay, please take your seats. Welcome to the 7 o'clock meeting of the Newport Beach City Council, April 24th, 2007. When we do the roll call?
The record will show that all members are present except for Council Member Webb, who is excused.
Thank you. Closed session report, City Attorney?
Nothing to report.
Okay, then we will move on to our Pledge of Allegiance and Invocation. Tonight we have with us Reverend Leah Stout with St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, so please remain standing after the Pledge of Allegiance. And tonight, why don't we have Councilman Curry lead us on the pledge.
Please join me in the pledge for the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will you please bow and join me for prayer? Our God of heaven and earth, we ask that you be with this council tonight as they gather to do the important work of running this city. Give them your wisdom to learn from the past, properly assess the present, and have vision for a realistic and successful future. We request not only your wisdom, Lord, but give them ears to listen, minds to think clearly, and hearts that have care and compassion to discern the true needs of the people they serve and how to best meet those needs. We also ask for an extra dose of energy and patience to carry them through the meeting. Lord, may you be honored in all that is said and done, and may your will be done this evening. Amen and amen.
Thank you, Reverend Stout. Okay, first up tonight we have a presentation by the Relay for Life folks. I see somebody in a purple shirt. I would assume that you are the representative.
That would be me. Thank you.
That would be you. Okay, take it away.
Hello, Mayor, Council members. My name is Krisztina Scheeff. It's spelled with a K and a Z. I just fill out a card down here. And I'm the event chair for the 6th Annual Relay for Life event in Newport Beach. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the event and invite you guys out at the Newport Beach Relay. I did look at the agenda earlier, so I'll try to be quick because I think you guys are going to be here for a while, so I'll speed it up. Relay for Life is the American Cancer Society's signature event. It's where the community comes together to fight cancer, raise awareness in the community, and raise funds. This year, more than 5,000 relays will take place in the U.S. as well as 23 other countries. So it's a worldwide event. Our event will be on May 19th and 20th. That's a Saturday and Sunday. We'll start at 10 a.m. sharp, and we'll finish at 10 a.m. And if you're sitting there wondering if you have to run for 24 hours, you're welcome to do so. But you don't have to do it by yourself. It is a team event. It's a relay. You form a team. You have a couple people on your team. You take turns walking around the track. And at 2 in the morning, if you're tired, we'll keep you busy with entertainment, bands, music, food. And I think our highlight is on Sunday morning, right, Fire Chief Lewis, is the breakfast cooked by the fire department, the Newport Beach Fire Department. So relay, it's not just really about fundraising. It is about raising awareness in the community. We do want to share some scary numbers with you. 1 out of 2 men and 1 out of 3 women in their life will hear that you have cancer. And we're fighting for this to get a little better numbers on there. For me, myself, I'm wearing a purple shirt. Relay is a chance to reflect on life, and 2007 marks my 10-year anniversary since I've been in remission. I was diagnosed with leukemia 10 years ago, and back then I had 30% chance of living for 5 years or longer, and today, after 10 years, if you're wondering if there is hope, just as my t-shirt says, there is hope because I'm standing here and want to invite you to come out and join us for a day and stop by. Quickly, I'll tell you about the American Cancer Society. It is the 2nd largest organization to fund research for cancer, right behind the U.S. government, being the number 1. And since 1946, since they were formed, they spent more than $3 billion in cancer research, and they funded many researchers. 40 of them won the Nobel Prize. So it's pretty amazing. They also spend 75% of the money goes to program services such as patient support, research, 21% goes to fundraising, if you wonder where your money goes, and only 4% to management and services. So we have a big goal this year to raise $150,000. We're doing pretty good. We're about $67,000, that is, today. So three more weeks to go. We'll have a good time. And just to finish up quick, Relay wouldn't be an event without a community. So whichever camera I'm on and whoever's watching at home to Newport Beach, thank you very much for your support. You've been a great community. To some of the committee members back there, thanks a bunch. And to all of you who are in this room, we'll invite you to join us. And thank you very much for your support. And, of course, Mayor, council members, and everybody here, thank you for the city of Newport Beach. You guys have been a great support. You guys started this out 6 years ago and continue to support us. And I, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Krisztina. Okay, that is our only presentation this evening, and we'll move on to notices to the public.
The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the council. Speakers must limit comments to 5 minutes on agenda items. The council has the discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones and pagers off or set them in the silent mode. This is a time for city council announcements or matters which council members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report.
Okay, why don't we start with Councilwoman Gardner?
Yes, Buck Gully is a fire hazard. In fact, according to our fire department, it is the #1 fire hazard in the city. And it's not a concern just for Buck Gully and the habitat there, but they are very afraid that under the right or actually the wrong circumstances, a fire in Buck Gully could mean wiping out at least the village of Corona del Mar. We'd have something on the lines of the Laguna fire. So it's a big concern. And the fire marshal has proposed a study to see if it would be feasible to have goats go in, as they do in Laguna, and do a little habitat diminution. And the Corona del Mar Residents Association supports it, and I have asked the fire marshal to go ahead with this study. He has money in his budget, so we will find out as soon as possible if this is feasible or whether we need to look at something else to handle this particular fire hazard.
Councilwoman Daigle.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rosansky. Up on Irvine Avenue by Bristol, we have our Newport Beach Golf Course, and as some of you may have read, the county holds the lease for the back 9, and there's a consideration of eliminating the back 9 and replacing it with a parking lot. And over the years, Newport Beach has weighed in on airport issues when they negatively impact our residents' quality of life. And in this particular area, what we're talking about is a loss of green space, or a diminution, I suppose you could say, as well as a loss of recreation area, and thousands of golfers, many of them Newport Beach residents, being impacted, as well as airport issues encroaching now south of Bristol. And so at our next hearing, I'd like, please, for the manager to bring a resolution for the council to consider that we would support the preservation of this green recreation space. And I have received a petition that we'll be providing each of the council members with copies of, which is now in excess of 1,300 signatures. So I know that there's a lot of public sentiment that is opposed to the removal of this golf course. And so I look forward to more dialogue on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Henn.
Just a couple of things. Last week was Police Department Week for me. I had the pleasure of Chief McDonald giving me a personal tour of our police headquarters. It's very clear that we need a new police headquarters, and I'm confident with all the practice that we've had in identifying a new City Hall location, we'll be able to quickly decide about the police headquarters. It is a part of our facilities master plan. In addition to that, I was able to do a ride-along with Sergeant Chuck Freeman on Friday night. And I didn't last into the wee hours, but that was a worthwhile experience to get to see the world from the other side of a police cruiser. And so thanks to Chuck, and it was just a lot of fun. With regard to other activities that were fun, my family and I have really been participating in the Newport Beach Film Festival. It's a fabulous event. We went to the premiere opening and then the John Wayne premiere opening, and then my daughter and her husband have been, I think, every night at various events. So we have a picture of them now with Adam Sandler. And so they're very happy. And I would just encourage everyone. This event runs through the 29th, and you should really take advantage of it. It's just a terrific event. And that's it.
Councilman Curry.
On April the 2nd, I attended a meeting that Councilmember Gardner had organized with the Irvine Company and our representatives from the police, fire departments, and traffic safety relative to the reopening of Pelican Hills Road South. And I am pleased to report that on schedule, that road will reopen on May the 1st. It's going to reopen at 12 noon so that there's not a conflict between the construction traffic coming in and people commuting to work. But at 12 noon on May 1st, Pelican Hills Road South will be reopened and available for use by the residents of that neighborhood.
Councilman Sellers. Mayor Pro Tem Sellers.
Thank you. On Saturday, May the 12th at 10:30 in the morning at the Balboa Island Fire Station, we're going to have the second annual Balboa Island Town Hall. And this is a time when the city manager and department heads from the various departments will come out and talk to the folks on Balboa Island and tell them what their departments are doing and give them a chance to ask questions of the various department heads and department representatives. And so it's not just restricted to Balboa Island. We don't check address records, so it's open to anyone to come and participate. Last year we had a good turnout, about 150 people, so I think we'll have a good turnout again this year.
Thank you. I have several things I'll just go over briefly. Councilman Henn kind of stole a little of my thunder about the film festival, but I too am enjoying it. I went to the premiere night. It was a great event at the big Newport theater. Was, I mean, there's 1,100 seats in there. It was almost entirely filled. And I also attended the John Wayne 100 Years of the Duke celebration over at the Palms Restaurant. And that was a great event. They had most of the family there, a lot of stars, a lot of people coming out from the film festival. But it is a great thing for our city. Over 400 full-length movies and hundreds more short films are being premiered all over the city. You still have an opportunity to get out there. I think Thursday night is closing night. Friday night is awards ceremony. The John Wayne movies, I believe, are going through Saturday. And aren't we having the drive-in at the actually
Duke at the Dunes?
Duke at the Dunes Saturday.
Will be Saturday. I think it's at 7:30. So
right. And
free parking is $4, but admission to the movie is free.
Free, right? So it'll be kind of like going to the drive-in theater all over again. So that'll be this Saturday. Next thing is I did get to meet or speak in front of the Rotary Club and the Exchange Club all in the same week. Both are great organizations helping our community and helping our citizens in many different ways. This past Sunday, we received this plaque. Actually, Councilwoman Daigle received it on behalf of the council. Came from the Kring and Chung Newport Beach Triathlon, which they managed to put together again after taking a one-year sabbatical, to put it nicely. But yes, they did have a very successful event this Sunday, and we look forward to working with them in the future. Last but not least, I'll be traveling tomorrow to Sacramento with our city attorney and assistant city manager Dave Kiff to testify at a Senate hearing on behalf of Senator Harmon's legislation dealing with the group home issue. And so with that, we'll move on to our consent calendar.
Consent calendar. All matters listed under consent calendar, items 1 through 13, are considered by the council to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. The city council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the council votes on the motion unless members of the council, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Members of the public who wish to discuss a consent calendar item should come forward to the lectern upon invitation by the mayor, state their name and item number. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium.
Thank you. We'll start with Councilman Henn. Anything to pull tonight?
No.
Councilman Curry?
No items?
Mayor Protem Selich?
I have nothing.
Councilwoman Daigle?
None, thank you.
Councilwoman Gardner?
None.
And I have none. Staff, any items they want to pull?
No items.
The public have any items they would like to see pulled? Seeing no one, do I hear a motion?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar items 1 through 13.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries.
Gotta love it. Okay, moving on to our first public hearing. And I would like to just make a quick announcement here. We do have an item here that doesn't appear on the blue agenda, but it's item number 20, dealing with a moratorium. I will ask the indulgence of council to move that item up to between items 17 and 18 tonight. I think the priority goals we can do on our own after that, and certainly the appointment to the committees can be done after that. Does anybody have any objection to that? Okay. So why don't we move on to item number 14, our first public hearing, in lieu park fees. I believe staff is recommending that this item be continued.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the item has been continued the last two city council meetings at the request of the BIA. Staff has met with the BIA. We've recently met with the appraiser that did the appraisal based upon the council policy on how park and lieu fees can be set, and staff at this time is requesting that this item be continued until the May 10th council meeting, at which time we are sure that we will come back with a staff recommendation.
Very good. Anybody on council object to that? Seeing no one, I'll open up for public comment. Seeing no one, please, motion, please.
Move the action.
Second.
Please vote. Okay,
Motion carries.
Item 15, Hoag Memorial Hospital Presbyterian Series 2007 Healthcare Facility Revenue Bonds. Do we have a staff report on that?
Mr. Dennis Danner, Administrative Services Director, will provide a staff report.
Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight's been the time set for the public hearing for the issuance of Hoag Hospital revenue conduit bonds in the amount of $500 million. The action before you this evening is to hold the public hearing and adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of not to exceed $500 million of the City of Newport Beach conduit revenue bonds, the execution and delivery of the loan agreement in substantially the form presented, the execution and delivery of the indenture is substantially the form presented, the execution of the preliminary official statement as well as Appendix A, and approval of the bond purchase contract in substantially the form presented, and direct staff to take the necessary steps to close this issue. I should mention briefly what conduit revenue bonds are. They're the city, the Hoag Hospital has asked the city to assist them in issuing these conduit revenue bonds. They're not the obligation of the city. The debt service is not the obligation of the city, and the city is not responsible for any of the payments. It's simply lending the city's assistance to the hospital as part, so they can issue this debt tax exempt. This was the 6th time that Hoag Hospitals approached the city and asked for our assistance, and staff is recommending that you conduct the public hearing and adopt the necessary resolution. And I know there's a lot of Hoag people here tonight if you need to ask any questions of bond counsel or anybody.
The $200,000 that they're paying for us to assist them with that, you feel is a fair?
I do. This is the, like I said, this is the 6th time the city has assisted the hospital, and the except for the very first issue, the fee that fee was $250,000. That's what established our paramedic program. But in all subsequent issues, the fee has been $200,000. I did some research, and that fee seems to be in the ballpark of what other financing authorities charge. The fee could be anything that the council deems it, but it seems to be in the ballpark.
Okay. Does anybody else in council have any questions of Dennis? Is there anybody from Hoag that wants to speak on this before we open it to the public? Thank you, Dennis. Okay, thank you.
I came here really today to talk about my water bill,
Okay, ma'am.
but this came up.
Ma'am, you know, you can talk about your water bill when we get to public comments on non-agenda items.
All right, now on HOAG Hospital, unfortunately, I had a brother-in-law.
Well, ma'am,
who-
can you state your name for the record?
Oh, Helen Karen, 3201 4th Avenue, Corona Del Mar.
Thank you.
And I haven't been able to reside there because of HOAG Hospital, all right? I've been following my husband for 3 years for what this hospital did to my family, all right? My brother-in-law was a Silver Star hero. They gave him the wrong medicine and killed him. Then my sister went in, her wife, and they threw her out to the state, all right? She had Lou Gehrig's disease. My husband was put in a straitjacket. The doctor said, don't you do that to him again. They turned around, and he dropped his heart monitor, and they did it again, all right? He didn't need stress. Now, I went in, I fell on my lawn, and I asked the paramedics to come and get me, all right? My husband needed care, and I didn't dare leave him home alone. And I said to the paramedics, put him in, take him with us. I had fallen, and I didn't know what. I thought I was having a heart attack. They picked Henry up, and they put him in the front seat of the ambulance. And he got into HOAG, and they had him in a wheelchair, okay? And he's waiting in the emergency room for me to be diagnosed. Well, they said, we're putting you in. What are you going to do with him? So, well, I hadn't seen my daughter in 2 years, and I said, well, call my daughter. And they suggested that, oh, she couldn't do it because of her back. Well, they suggested he be taken to this place on Dover until I got out of the hospital. Well, I got in your little place on Dover that most of the people in Newport Beach don't even know it exists. It's called Newport Bay. Do any of you know of it? Do you? Well, HOAG suggested my daughter take my husband over to this wonderful place. They know all about this, and they can handle it, and it'll be beautifully done. The next day, when HOAG let me go, you know, you go into HOAG for 2 days, and they get paid for 10 by Medicare. So they dump you in 2 days. Well, I got dumped, all right? Let me tell you, my husband was in your Newport Bay, hidden on Dover. He was beaten. His legs were beaten so bad he can't walk today. This is the kind of hospital we have. He was stabbed. He was dragged back like a pig. Only his heels were touching. That thing exists on Dover. You can see the Mormon church from it. It's in the weeds back there. All right? So what HOAG said I could go home. So I waited. He said, the heart doctor wants to speak to you. I waited till 7:30 at night. They told me this at 11 in the morning. He never came. And when I was ready to go, I said, we're going to leave. She said, your husband's very lonesome for you. I said, I know, okay? I know him. He's never without his family. I got there, and they jammed me with a needle. They threw me on a bed, and 3 fat men jumped all over me. I have a broken sternum. I had diverticulitis. I had osteoporosis of the hip, and 3 men jumped me. And another man was doing this to my skirt, all right? And then I got a needle. What was going on? I didn't know where I was, who was with me, nothing. I never recognize the place. And this is what HOAG does to you. They do this every single day of their existence. They will take a patient and decide what that patient, where it goes. All right? Well, wasn't this a ducky idea of putting me with my husband, all right, for $39,000? I mean, this place is a sewer. That's what that HOAG hospital is. And when you get up to a doctor and you say, I don't want to go in, well, you have insurance, don't you? Yeah, I have plenty of insurance, but I didn't expect to be taken like I was taken in that place. They did nothing for me, absolutely nothing. No prognosis, no diagnosis, no prognosis,
Ma'am,
nothing.
I'm sorry to hear about the problems you had,
but these
ma'am,
people are looking for
I
these
understand,
people's money.
but you've had your 5 minutes and your time is up.
Why, don't you want to hear any more? Huh?
The public is
You can
allowed
go
5
treat it
minutes,
like
ma'am.
this.
The red light is blinking. Your time is
And
up.
for 3 years, we've been running, and they're taking our home from us. How do you like this?
That's between you and the hospital, ma'am.
You better believe it, but it's going to be in this paper, and I'm going to get this message across to the American people that this is happening every single day in a hospital.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Your time is up. There's a lot of other people waiting here to talk. Please, take your seat.
Well, let's find out about it, huh?
Thank
Let's
you.
really find, when I'm talking, remember me, okay? I got something to say.
Thank you.
And right now, they jammed it with the...
Ma'am, we need to move on.
Against the law.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this issue?
You people ought to wake up.
Okay, seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
I'd like to make the motion to approve the item as recommended by staff.
Second.
Okay, please vote.
Motion carries.
Okay, our next item is review of the Community Development Block Grant Fiscal Year 2007-2008 one-year action plan for submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Mr. Mayor, Dan Tremble will provide the staff report, after which you need to open a public hearing.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The staff report discusses the allocation of community development block grants for the fiscal year of 2007-2008. Our allocation from the government this year is $370,332. This item, if you look on page 7 of the staff report, there's a table that shows the allocation of the funds by the different groups. Public service programs, we had several applications this year, and that shows the allocation for those. It also describes the administration as well as the different capital expenditure programs that we have. I can go into detail on those if you wish, or answer any specific questions you might have about the program.
Does anybody have any questions on council? Yes, Nancy.
I know that we publicize this by just the regular public notice in the thing, but do we do any other kind of outreach? Because I'm surprised at how few applications we had. And I was also surprised, and I'm not objecting to it, but I noticed, for example, that in the Human Options, that which is a battered woman program, and they serve 2 people, not that that's not an important issue, but that I'm wondering if in our city whether they make other arrangements perhaps. And so I'm just wondering if we had made any effort to reach out beyond the usual suspects in terms of our applications.
Like you said, we do publish it in the newspaper, and we also do send out to past recipients as well as the current recipients. And we do occasionally throughout the year get calls from different groups that may be either startups or expanding their service area. It does ebb and flow in terms of the number of applications we get. In the past, it has been more competitive in terms of the funding. Recently, however, there's been a lot of issues with services that are just declining to apply for the program because of some of the burdens of administration with these funds and the amounts that they're getting, so that they have just declined to do these and have gone for private sources or other sources that are less bureaucratic, lacking a better term.
Yeah. Plus, virtually every city provides these types of funds, don't they? And
every city that receives allocations directly, as well as the county, which administers a large portion.
So it's a pretty well-known program. It's not like just something that Newport's doing.
Yes. And everybody's familiar with this time of year as far as that's when all the cities in the county allocate. And
right. Any other questions, council?
Dan, I see here one of the recipients proposed is Serving People in Need, and that's an organization that's been receiving grants from us for some time.
That's correct. The current program that we're talking about, the SARP program, has been funded since 2002-2003. Jean Wagner did call me and say she unfortunately couldn't be here tonight because her son is in the hospital. But she's the administrator of the program. She has been for some time. We did discuss, her application, and I don't know if you have any specific questions about that, but I'd be happy to answer
I understand that they do provide housing services for recovering addicts.
I believe they have a referral program, but as far as I know, they do not refer to any houses in Newport.
So none of these funds would be used in Newport Beach then?
That's correct.
Dan, how many years are left on the loan that the city's made?
The Section 108 loan,
Yeah.
that was made in the first year of the Balboa Village improvements. So I believe we have
Ridgeway.
something like 22 years left. I can
22?
check on that and confirm it. But it's something where we have looked into whether we could pay it off in advance, but because of the way that the bonds are underwritten, there's certain obligations that it can't be paid off in advance. So.
Okay.
One
Thank
other
you.
question.
Oh, sorry.
No, if the CDBG program were to go away for some reason, that loan would as well. Is that correct?
The legislation that was in place at the time we took out the loan, it was the understanding that there was a forgiveness provision if the program should go away, that the 108 obligation would go away as well.
Okay. And where are we in terms of the CDBG funding overall? No, it's federal funds that come to us. I mean, what's the trend? Do you see us getting more funds or less funds?
The recent trend until this year was that it was declining at a fairly rapid pace. This year it was rather steady, and I think that pace of decline has either tapered off or will diminish to a point where it won't severely affect the program in the next few years.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open this up for public comment. Anybody on the public want to comment on this? Seeing no one, bring it back for a motion.
I'll move the action.
Second.
Okay, please vote.
Motion carries.
Thank you. One thing I forgot to mention, actually, on public announcements is that we have Mr. Abel's government class with us tonight, out in the audience. Why don't we see a show of hands? All those people were from Mr. Abel's government class. Okay, good chunk of people. They're all from Corona Del Mar High School. Thank you for coming and joining us tonight. Okay, our next agenda item is public comments. Public comments, well, we'll let the city clerk do it. She does it so well.
Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record.
Anybody have a public comment on a non-agenda item?
Good evening. My name is Bob Rush. 2 weeks ago, I asked the council's help to look into the apparent conflict of interest surrounding Bob Burnham in Ordinance 2004-16 relating to group homes. Since then, a number of you have publicly stated the issue had no merit, no evidence, and that you didn't think that there was a conflict at all. So I trust that you've done your research. If so, then, please explain these items to the community. Continuing from my prior presented items, 1 through 3, please explain now item 4. An email sent June of 2003 by then City Attorney Bob Burnham to the City Attorney of Orange stating, David, I am working with Judge Wendy Lindley and others to develop a drug court support foundation. It continues, could you please let me know if that grant could be given to the foundation to provide drug court support service to program participants? No mention of Burnham's wife. How about items 5 and 6 respectively? Email sent on Monday, March 15, 2004 from Kathy Burnham of the Drug Court Foundation to Diane Cotto, City of Orange Economic Development, instructing her to fax attachment A to 644-3139, attention Bob Burnham, City Attorney. I will change the information and return it to you by tomorrow. Subsequently, a fax was sent out the next business day from the City of Newport Beach, from the Newport Beach City Attorney's Office, apparently by Bob Burnham using city letterhead, Office of the City Attorney. The fax going to Cotto was a revised attachment A to a block grant agreement appearing to include an activity summary that states the foundation, i.e. the Drug Court Foundation of Orange County, will receive and donate to drug courts beds in recovery facilities that will expand the number of participants in the program. they were apparently giving participants promotional stays at rehab that rehab operators were giving away. Those stays were all over Orange County, including Newport Beach. Lastly, please explain items 7 and 8. How in February 2004, the city allowed Bob Burnham to sign a contract with California Strategies, a consulting firm, for $25,000 a month to provide services to Newport Beach, while at the same time, California Strategies sat on the advisory board of Burnham's wife's drug court foundation, as shown in item 8, without Burnham ever mentioning this fact publicly or in any conflict of interest filing. For obvious reasons, 2 actions need to happen here pretty quickly. 1, the council, in light of the advisory board issue, should require Bob Burnham to make public any financial dealings with California Strategies and its associates related to Kathy Burnham, the National Council of Alcohol and Drug Dependence, NCADD, and the Drug Court Foundation of OC. Secondly, the council should require that every council member who voted on Ordinance Modification 2004-16, including Councilman Rosansky, Webb, and Daigle, identify any financial dealings that they have had with Bob or Kathy Burnham and the NCADD or the Drug Court Foundation of Orange County during any time prior to voting on Ordinance 2004-16. Council, until action is taken, your silence to these questions will be viewed as a serious problem affecting your credibility, your integrity, and your future electability. I reiterate the point that I made in the last council meeting. It appears that ordinance modification relating to It appears that Ordinance Modification 2004-16 relating to group homes is tainted with a potential serious conflict of interest. The council has been given notice, and going forward, your use of this ordinance will be at the peril of lawsuit of any member of the community who feels they are damaged by this tainted law. This presentation is my opinion.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else? Public comment on non-agenda item? This is the time, ma'am. As soon as these people are done. Wait. Once.
All right. I have tried to pay
Sorry,
my water
Linda.
bill. I do not live in the house any longer. I have received over $500 in water bills. Now, today I came to pay the bill. Here's the billing. Here's one, $29.57, $26.43. All right? I came to pay it. I said, look this up and tell me exactly what I owe. All right? And he said, $260. I don't figure it, okay? I don't figure what you're doing here. Now, when you try to call long distance to get the phone at Newport Beach, you can't get a soul. My cell phone ran out. I called Nichols. I called Bow, is his name. Now, what kind of help do you have? I would like to pay my bill. I cannot reach you people. You got to speak to me in Spanish, huh? I want to speak English. Now, she ran this off. You tell me what the hell is going on here, all right? I would like to pay my bill.
All right, ma'am, if you'll write your name and phone number down on a piece of paper, I'll make sure that someone contacts you tomorrow. You have my word on that.
I don't have a telephone. I'm here. I traveled for miles to get here.
Well, unfortunately,
I want to settle this today.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Mayor, if she...
You have such poor representation as far as the public is concerned. You cannot reach this place. And I have done it several times.
Okay, ma'am, I'm trying to help you. Hold on for one second.
You help me. I'd like to pay my bill and go back.
I'd love for you to pay your bill, ma'am, believe me.
Mr. Mayor, if she comes to the City Hall at 8 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Glenn Everode is here. He's listening to this. He's in charge of the revenue people, and she can pay her bill at 8 o'clock
I just was in there.
You know, Glenn, maybe you can talk to this woman right now. Actually, this is the man who handles revenue collection in our town, and he would be the man to speak to.
Meeting to settle a bill.
Well, we want to help you out as best as we can.
That the people in Newport Beach ought to know about these hospitals that are killing
Ma'am,
people.
that's not the subject of this discussion right now.
You can't get it out. The paper.
Ma'am, I'm trying to help you. Please go with Mr. Everode, and he'll be happy to straighten out your bill. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi there.
My name is Debbie Calvert, and I'm a longtime resident of Newport Beach. In 2003, Bob Burnham, acting as city attorney, entered into a city contract with California Strategies, a contract without city council approval. California Strategies then set on advisory board.
Debbie, can you move the microphone down a little so people can hear what you're saying? Thank you.
then set on the advisory board, can you hear me?
Got to talk right into it.
Of the Burnham's Drug Rehab Foundation. It is a matter of record that our city made payments to California Strategies of nearly $1 million between 2003 and 2006.
Debbie, one more second. Please bear with me. Can you close those doors out there? So,
You really want to hear this?
I've been wanting to, well, I met you last time, and glad you're coming to the meeting. I'd much rather see you in person than get anonymous emails. Well,
Anonymous?
well, without a
Never
face.
sent you
I meant
anonymous
without a
emails.
face. Sorry.
The City Council adopted a policy for conflict of interest on June 22nd, 1998. It reads in part, the city charter and state statutes prohibit public officials from having a financial interest in any transaction to which the city is a party. In some cases, public officials may participate in decisions if their interests are minor and made public. Former City Attorney Mr. Burnham admitted April 21st, 2007 in a submission to the Daily Pilot that his wife received a salary from her drug rehab-related business NCADD. This financial interest does not appear to have been disclosed at any time before in the public record or in conflict of interest filings. Under the section policy notice, it states every city official shall promptly notify the city attorney when they become aware of facts that suggest their participation in the decision could give rise to a conflict of interest. Under the section procedure, it states the city attorney shall promptly prepare a legal opinion advising the official if the potential conflict relates to the city charter, and shall assist the official in obtaining appropriate advice if the conflict involves state law. And finally, within the section titled Disqualification, the policy reads, when a member of the City Council, Board, or Commission has or reasonably believe they have a conflict of interest, the official shall abstain from any participation in the decision. The member shall disclose the reason for abstaining prior to the vote on the matter that involves the conflict of interest. In cases where the official has remote interest that does not require disqualification, the official shall disclose the interest at the meeting. Again, if that was the case, where is his statement to the City Council recorded? And in all cases, disclosure of the interest or conflict shall be made a part of the public record. The mere appearance of a conflict calls for answers to obvious questions. The community deserves these answers.
Yes,
I need
Rob?
to answer that.
Sure, go ahead.
There was no financial interest in the drug court in any of the items that were before the city or any business operated in the city.
Is that it? Thank you. Mr. Crotty.
Don Crotty. Early this year, Supervisor Morlock and staff moved that the county would look at very seriously taking the Newport Beach golf course, a portion that they hold, that the county holds, to make a extension of their long-term parking facility, which they would lose a large portion of the golf course. This is a huge impact to open space, not immediately in the city's jurisdiction, but certainly as part of the county holdings. There's some people in the audience tonight that are impacted by this. I'm a member of the men's club at this small course, and it's kind of a fixture for a lot of people in the city. This is a huge loss of public open space, and what I think we would like is we would like the council to take a position, perhaps pass something that they could send on to the county of advisory level. I'm very thankful to speak tonight. Answer any questions if you'd like, or the rest of the people that want to speak on this issue might hear them in order. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Don. I believe Councilwoman Daigle at earlier comments, I don't know if you were here yet, but
I missed those. I apologize.
She'd asked that it come back on as an agenda item next meeting, that we take an official position
I had
on
to
that.
run down tonight from the gym, so I apologize for the way I look.
That's okay, Don. And speaking for myself, and probably most of the council members, I don't think that will be opposed to making our view known that we would like to see the golf course stay. So if that'll help all the other people in the audience, I don't think we have a problem with that.
Mr. Mayor, could I just set the record straight on
Sure.
one thing, and
Yes.
that is that the only conversation I've had with anyone at the county was with Alan Murphy, who met with me approximately 6 weeks ago and ran this concept by me. He asked me not to say anything to anybody else. He just wanted to get my feedback. I told him that I thought that it would be a very, very difficult thing to do. Staff hasn't talked about this issue with Supervisor Morlock or anybody else at the county.
Okay, thank you.
I would just, Mr. Mayor, say I don't want anyone to get the impression necessarily this is Mr. Morlock's idea, because I don't believe, in fact, he even supports this concept, as may have been alluded.
In fact, I think he even floated an alternative proposal. So,
hi, my name is Keith Wyrick. I do not live in Newport Beach, nor did I just come from the gym, as you can see. But I wanted to personally, as well as everybody at Newport Beach Golf Course, thank Councilwoman Leslie Daigle for her efforts as far as opening up her email and accepting, I guess, which is closing in on 1,000 emails of the people's concern. I'm not going to take any more time, but I urge you as an employee, and Don said it very well, this will have a huge impact not only on older people, but very young people as far as having a place to go, which is still well-run family business and always has been. And just to go off track a little, personally, I see it differently as far as a place where we have raised thousands and thousands of dollars, and the Lane family has always been open, and there has never been an extra charge for any tournament, for any type of organization. And not more than about 3 months ago, a family member of one of our employees was injured in Iraq very seriously. And just the efforts of the people of Newport Beach, I don't think anyone knows anyone that did not donate, and we raised over $37,000 in about a 20-day period and held a golf tournament there, and the Lanes donated the course. So I just want to make sure that the City Council hears all sides of it. And we know that no decisions have been made, and there's all types of proposals. And as an employee, I don't know how all that runs, but I would just hope that people will realize the impact it will have on everybody that comes to that. And I really appreciate the opportunity and the privilege of being able to stand before you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Keith is a familiar face. He's the starter at the golf course.
Well paid, I might add.
Good man to know.
Thank you.
And I have to tell you, the only group I've received more emails from on an issue is the triathletes, but I think the golfers are going to surpass that.
Thank you.
So we know how active you guys can be.
Just to be clear, the property is not within the city, correct?
We understand.
No, I'm asking my staff. Sharon or Homer?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's whatever action is going to be taken, it's not going to be an official action by the city of Newport Beach. It's the county owns that property. The county makes the final decisions. Certainly, we can weigh in, as Councilwoman Daigle has requested, and I think we will at our next meeting. And hopefully we can.
All we want is your support.
I
have no financial interest or no involvement, except I'm a duffer golfer, and I enjoy going there and playing, where I can go out on a Saturday morning and get in 18 holes in 3.5 hours, not in 6 hours, and it doesn't cost me $300 or $400 to do it. And I think there are just hundreds and hundreds of people who are enjoying that same privilege, and it would be a real crime, I think, to take that away from the people. And I do also say that, and like I said the other morning at our meeting, I'm no tree hugger, but I do think that we should preserve some green in this county, and we're giving up an awful lot of it every week. We're paving over, like the old song said, we're tearing down a park to build a parking lot. And I think it's almost a crime.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, what was your name for the record, sir?
John Campbell.
John Campbell. Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Hi, my name's Steve Lane. I'm one of the co-owners of Newport Beach Golf Course. And I'm here tonight to tell you just a quick background. We started the project
Can you speak in the microphone? So
we started the project in 1972 and opened the doors of July of '76. And we have opened it to the general public from 2 years old to 90 years old. And that open space is just vital, for anybody to play, kids, tournaments. We've had 3 Red Cross tournaments there. We've had various tournaments. We've had weddings in the restaurant. The back 9 is vital only because that's where our water is. Our well is there. That waters the entire course. So if that's gone, then I don't know how we're going to restructure the water system to water the front 9, so to speak. And the back 9 is a little more challenging, and it makes it a little more fun, and so on and so forth. So it's just, I'm here to thank Councilman Daigle thank you very much yesterday for the meeting, and just to let you know who I am, and if anybody needs to contact me, I'll be at anybody's disposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Good evening. Bill Shaver, Newport Beach. Obviously, I'm a senior, and I play the Newport Beach golf course. It is the only golf course that we seniors can play and improve our handicap. It's also the cheapest golf course we can play. To lose that would be a great loss, a tremendous loss. To cut it to 9 holes is ridiculous. If you remember, Costa Mesa tried that on the Costa Mesa golf course, and a huge outpouring occurred, and they retreated. Any effort to cut that down, I think, would be a huge loss to us seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Hi, my name's Tony Jones. I'm an 18-year-old student at Corona High School. I'm sorry to ramble on about the golf thing, but coming from a relatively young person, I definitely support the golf course. I've gone there since I've been 6 years old, and it's a great place. I actually went there yesterday and played a little round of golf. So I also asked the council to consider, not tearing that down, because that's the only place I go. It's the only place I can afford. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we do not control that property. It's not within the city limits. It's not subject to our zoning, and ultimately the decision will be made at the county. So all those folks that are appearing here tonight, I hope you're getting in touch with your county representatives, because certainly that's where any decision will be finally made.
Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Orozco. I was here in October of 2003. I'm sorry to be back, and it seems like the situation has gotten worse, and I have a formal complaint to file. I wanted to ask the mayor if I can have 6 minutes.
6 minutes, sure, Linda.
I was hoping you'd say no, because
Okay,
it was
no.
double my time.
Because why?
Because it was double the time you allot everyone else. The complaint I'm filing today, and that I wanted to file on record, on video, with the City Council, is a complaint regarding the expansion of one of the rehab houses in Newport Beach. Bob Rush's comments are very well taken. In the 3 and 4 years I've been working on the situation here, I have seen the city tainted with corruption, with lies, with deception. And I ask the question, Newport Beach city officials, cowards, conspirators, or incompetents? Since 2003, and actually since the 80s, we've had neighbors in our neighborhood complain to the city. Hundreds of residents after 2003, however, complained, and actively complained, to city officials regarding violations of over-occupancy, traffic, noise, parking, service vehicles, and other issues at a residential property, 1810 West Oceanfront. This is a 3-apartment building triplex with 3 off-street parking spaces. Complaints were filed with the city in writing during city council meetings, public hearings in 2004, using photographs, videos, and State Department reports to document our complaints. At that time, this facility was supposed to be restricted to 27 people, staff and clients. I've attached to the handout I've given you at least 3 violations that were documented by the state, not the ones that we videotaped or counted ourselves. In 2000, there were 37 beds counted on a property that was supposed to have 27 occupancy, staff and clients. In 2003, they were shown to have 31 beds on the property and a lot more beds in the alleyway because we had reported them to the fire marshal and they were emptying beds out of the property. In 2004, they had 44 people on the property. Again, the fire marshal had restricted them to 27 staff and clients. We filed our complaints, and what was the result? The city of Newport Beach issued a new certificate of occupancy and doubled the occupancy to 49 persons at this triplex. The city violated their own city zoning code of 20.62.050 and failed to require a conditional use permit for any expansion, increase, or intensification of a non-conforming use in a residential property. I filed complaints with the city prior to the new certificate of occupancy being approved by the city. and his response in writing in your attachment says they did not consider going from 27 to 49 an intensification of the use of the property. So I ask you, cowards, conspirators, or incompetents? At 1810 West Oceanfront, a triplex, it is the Southern California headquarters for Narconon. The property owners are Carolyn and Jean Ross, who live on Lido Island and have been unresponsive for a decade to our complaints. The occupancy is now 49, parking spaces 3, full-time staff 29. And the city claims that 27 to 49 is not an increase in occupancy. I find that appalling.
Okay, anybody else?
Hello, Corky Rawlings, Newport Beach. On Sunday, April 22nd, the pilot named Mr. Bob Burnham's response to the pilot's calling attention to his potential conflict of interest regarding group homes. I want to commend the pilot for speaking plainly and illuminating these issues. Mr. Burnham hired 2 outside attorneys, Mr. Goldfarb and Ms. Walcott, to, quote, evaluate our zoning ordinances in relation to our ability to control group homes, unquote. The pilot further quotes Mr. Burnham as saying, quote, my direction to Mr. Goldfarb and Ms. Walcott was to draft an ordinance that gave the city as much control over group homes as the law would allow. If, in fact, that is what they were instructed to do, why are we facing the situation that we're in now? Mr. Burnham presided over the making of our group home regulation less public and more secret by removing the conditional use permit process for these uses. A CUP alerts the public by giving public notice and allows for discussion. This requirement seems to have been erased. Mr. Burnham, or the consultants he hired, got rid of the CUP, and the public has slept soundly through the most rapid and dense proliferation of group homes in city history. Why? A significant number of people in the community would like to see any written record of the instruction given prior to this ordinance being adopted. The question of conflict of interest is reduced to small because Bob Burnham states in the pilot that, quote, in 2004, when I helped prepare a city group home ordinance, his wife received only a small salary from the Drug Court Foundation, unquote. This entity places folks in these homes, and the more referrals they place, the longer they get to stand at the public trough. I'm content with the Fair Political Practices Commission deciding what is small. But for us in the city, the much larger issue is, why were our laws relaxed during Mr. Burnham's reign with specific regard to the issue of group homes? In the pilot article, Mr. Burnham says that, quote, I can understand why individuals who are ignorant of state laws that restrict a city's ability to regulate group homes would be suspicious of the official whose wife is helping with those addictions, unquote. I'm not sure that the public is ignorant. Rather, they have been ignored. It would be a good idea to get the CUP requirement back on the books. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that has public comment on non-agenda item?
Shannon Jakowski. I live on the peninsula. Thrilled to see high school students here. I come as a mother with children between the ages of 12 and 16, and I'm deeply concerned about how my neighborhood has directly changed. I attended the meeting at the library several weeks ago and was even more shocked as I began to find out the information of how these homes are run or not handled in the white vans, etc. I encourage every mother and father in Newport Beach to be involved and aware of what's going on. We have them right across from Newport Elementary School. Those of you who have children that participate in junior guards and ride their bikes daily all summer by these places need to know what's going on. Those of you who have children that sail in the sailing programs, those of us who live here and have seen what has happened really come down to having two choices. And I commended the Newport Beach Police Department because you're the only reason I feel safe currently living on this Balboa Peninsula, and I appreciate the efforts that they do, and I've, again, had to call them more in the last several years than I have in the last decade. And it seems to me as a resident who's concerned about everything from property values to safety to what's going on, we have two choices. One is we become deeply involved and deeply concerned and find out what's going on and don't stop until it's all out and things are changed. Or number two, we put our house up for sale and move. As a neighbor of mine did, actually on the day of that library meeting 2 weeks ago, his name's Todd Ridgway. His house is on the market. I currently don't want to move. I would like to stay. I love my neighborhood. I love this ocean. And you young people here, I hope you take this word back home. Thank you.
Anybody else that has a public comment on a non-agenda item?
Hi, my name's Max Liskin. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but the name of an individual has come up several times, Mr. Burnham, which came up in something I looked at, and I just wanted to ask a question of the council. When addressing the issue of regulating rehab facilities in Newport, the city frequently cites its concern about discrimination against handicapped people and exposing the city to legal action by the rehab community. However, in 2004, the Newport Beach Municipal Code was changed concerning short-term lodging permits, and that affected people in R1 areas. People could no longer rent their homes for less than 30 days. The adoption of the ordinance was based upon the concern by the city and the staff that short-term lodging could change the character of these neighborhoods, as described by the former city attorney, Robert Burnham. And if you go into the council's discussions, he says staff is concerned that the issuance of permits for dwelling units in R1 zones, areas with relatively low densities and typically fewer short-term or long-term rentals, could change the character of those neighborhoods. To address this concern, staff is proposing an amendment, etc., that prohibits short-term lodging. My question is, why is it discriminatory to regulate rehab activities in single-family residential when the city has already regulated the homeowners? As a homeowner, you are now being regulated in terms of short-term lodging. The very essence of any city is its homeowners. Moreover, the regulation was based upon the very same concerns the homeowners have about the growth of rehab in Newport. Finally, if the city is concerned about litigation, I think it should consider what it has at risk and if it's worth losing, this city. Rehab continues to grow at its current, if the city allows rehab to grow at its current rate. I understand rehab. I think that it has its place, but I think the city's concern about discrimination as a layperson seems to me to have already been answered when they tell me as a homeowner what I can do and can't do. The rehab's a business. Why aren't they subject to that, and why would it be viewed as discriminatory? So that's my issue, and thank you, and I appreciate your time.
All right. All right, we do not need applause after every speaker. If we're going to have that, then I'm going to just clear the room. I prefer to just move in an orderly manner. We're not here to applause one side or the other. Thank you.
Ken Bryant. I'm a resident of Newport Beach. I have a short-term lodging facility on 46th Street. Based upon all these comments from Bob Rush and Cookie Walling, Shannon Jakowski, it sounds more like this group, this board has been more on like the board of directors for sober living than the board for Newport Beach. I think that lumping short-term lodging with sober living facilities is a clever ploy, but it's really goofy. I mean, I enjoy a short-term lodging permit.
Sir, we're going to be taking that up as our next agenda item. So that's, if you want to talk about that, why don't you wait until then? Okay, thank you, sir. This is public comments on non-agenda items. Okay, seeing no one else, we'll close that section of our meeting. We'll move on to oral reports from City Council on committee activities. Does anybody have something they want to report on? Seeing no one. Planning Commission agenda and oral status report, item number 17. Dave Lipo, is Dave here? Dave, there you are, hiding behind Sharon. Come on up.
Sorry, I was reading another report. I'm sorry, agenda item. I apologize.
Oh, the Planning Commission agenda, 17.
Oh, I'm sorry, we took that over. I apologize, Mayor. Planning Commission agenda considered two items that were both approved. One was for the Balboa Inn, which was a live entertainment permit, use permit to apply to private events to be held at the inn 7 days a week. Planning Commission took testimony from area residents, from the proposed applicants, and decided in the end that the live entertainment for private events only would be appropriate if limited to the dining area. They imposed conditions of approval that included a new set of doors on the oceanfront side to prevent noise from spilling out into the courtyard and to the adjacent residential uses. Limited the private events on Fridays and Saturday nights to 11 p.m. Rather than allowing continue to 1 a.m. with the operation of the restaurant. With those conditions, the Planning Commission approved, and we think that will take care of that situation. The other item was a sign program for the Bel Mare, was previously known as Mariners Gateway Project, the commercial center to build on the north side of Coast Highway at Dover. Back when it was approved last year, the Commission asked that the applicant come forward with the new sign program. They reviewed it. There was a lot of concern about light emitted from the sign program affecting the residents above on the cliff on Kings Row. We're going to come back in a year and monitor that. They also found the landscaping plan and some changes in the facade. There was a rearrangement of the massing on the second story, different from what was originally proposed. The Planning Commission reviewed that and the landscaping plan and found those in conformity with what was originally approved and approved both the sign program and the conformity plan.
Okay, anybody have any questions of Dave? No? Thank you, Dave. All right, as I said earlier, we'll be taking item number 20 out of order, and so we'll be hearing that one next. Item number 20 is an interim urgency ordinance of the City of Newport Beach, California, making findings and establishing a temporary moratorium on the establishment and operation of new residential uses that are transitory in nature, such as parolee, probationer homes, safe houses, unlicensed residential care facilities, and residential care facilities general, as well as the issuance of new short-term lodging permits in all residential zoning districts of the city. Who's going to be giving the staff report on this?
I will.
Okay, Robin?
Okay. I guess I'll start off with an outline, just kind of a summary of what the ordinance proposed moratorium would do. It would establish a temporary 45-day time period on the establishment, prohibiting the establishment or issuance of permits for new transitory residential uses within the city with certain legally required exceptions. The transitory uses would include new residential uses where the average tenancy is usually less than 90 days. Examples of types of transitory uses that would be subject to the moratorium would be establishment of parolee probationer homes, safe houses, sober living homes, and other unlicensed recovery facilities, regardless of the number of residents in which the average length of stay is usually less than 90 days. Residential care facilities, general, which are the ones with 7 or more residents, in which the average length of stay is usually less than 90 days. Short-term lodging, unless permits, and those are by definition for less than 90 days because they're for rentals for a period of 30 days or less. These new transitory uses may not be established during the 45-day period, and no use permits or any other type of licenses may be issued for them to the extent that one is required. Some of these uses don't require a permit at this time. The uses that are expressly exempted from the moratorium are because of state law provisions requiring that they must be treated as a single-family use, which will be allowed to continue to open. So any single-family use with over a longer term rather than a transitory term with people intent of maintaining a residence here for a longer than a average 90-day stay are exempted. These other exemptions are large and small family daycare homes and state licensed facilities providing non-medical care, day treatment, or foster agency services for 6 or fewer adults. and that is because under state law, they are defined as a residential use and may not be treated otherwise. The moratorium will apply, though, to licensed residential care facilities if that new licensed facility proposes to operate as an integral facility with another existing facility, and together those facilities serve 7 or more adults, children, or children and adults. And that is the idea of integral facilities, is to get at the ones that open up perhaps in a duplex with one above with 6 and one in another, and they're providing services within the residential for both of them, and they're licensed. Actually, some facilities might be licensed by the state for more than 6, even though they may tell the city that they're going to be operating with 6. But the ones that are operating as an independent and are not providing services, for instance, a sober living home that's being provided services at an off-site place, would be able to go in. Also, based upon the state and the federal fair housing laws, we are required to apply for and provide for reasonable accommodation during that period, and there's a process set up for that. This moratorium involves a complex nexus of legal issues that have been interpreted by both the state and federal courts on restrictive, fair housing, and disability laws, and the city's legitimate right to protect the character of its neighborhoods through appropriate planning and zoning laws. To help address these two areas of law, I asked for outside legal counsel, and I hired the firm of Oakland-based firm of Goldfarb and Littman. Polly Marshall and Barbara Kautz have been working on this with extensive experience in both fair housing and planning issues. They have prepared this moratorium that I presented to the council, working with our office and focusing on the transitory effects of the effects of transitory uses on our residential neighborhoods. They recommend that this moratorium be adopted in its current form for the following legal reasons. The moratorium applies to all new transitory uses. Fair housing law cases and cases interpreting California's Constitution right to privacy require cities to focus their regulations on the use rather than the user. The moratorium's inclusion of short-term lodging permits is important and consistent with the city's intent to control transitory uses as opposed to a particular class of residents. Courts have recognized that transitory rental uses can threaten the character of neighborhoods, and is the intent of this moratorium period is to look at all the different transitory uses. The transitory rental uses is the short term, and transitory housing for disabled or transitory housing such as parolee homes, to look at the appropriate, any additional regulations that might be necessary appropriate to the impacts of the individual use. Failure to evaluate all the transitory uses would likely cause a court to conclude that the city operated with discriminatory intent to exclude a protected class of residents. If so, the courts would determine that the ordinance is discriminatory on its face. I have asked outside counsel to look at other ordinances and look at some other recent cases that have been brought to my attention. They have reviewed specifically, and some other ones as well, but the recently adopted, the ordinance recently adopted by the city of Murrieta. And they have advised that, in their opinion, this ordinance would be considered facially discriminatory by the courts, particularly because the Ninth Circuit Court has looked at distancing restrictions on housing for the disabled, and they have found, in the standard for regulations to be applied, can only be upheld if the city can demonstrate that either the restriction was adopted because of a legitimate safety concern or to benefit the disabled. That is the basis for the ordinance and the regulations that we must come up with. We have to be able to establish that. This 40-day period will give the city some time to analyze the police and code enforcement records with respect to all transient uses and establish whether legitimate safety concerns exist for any particular class of transient residents or all of them. Outside counsel has advised that if the city can base changes to its ordinances on real documented impacts, the city can adopt a number of restrictions on transitory uses that will not violate fair housing laws. The 45-day moratorium will give the city a chance to develop the necessary data to support those changes without having new uses established that create additional impacts. And I wanted to provide, one of the things, and I know there's been a lot of questions coming up, is why did we include the short-term lodging? And this issue came up, and it was raised partially because we do know that the sober living industry has asked for and is aware of the fact that we have quite a few transitory uses in the city. And as part of the city's study of this, we feel, and outside council's advised, that we should evaluate those uses as well to determine what impacts they have and how they may or may not change the residential character different than the recovery homes and some of the other types of transitional housing that might be adopted. And can I get some help? I want to give the council an idea on some information that I gathered from the Revenue Division, Glenn Everett, and he's here today to answer any questions you might have on the short-term lodging permits. But well, I'll just use my microphone. One of the issues that has come up is the issue of how many of these facilities are there, and we also have had some concerns raised by the sober living representatives of the CRC Health, that the map that some people in the community have looked at that indicates that they believe that all these sober living or recovery homes exist. And what I decided to do was to at least try to find out from our own city records what we might establish exist in the city. And this map represents, and it's hard to see, but it's the red dots. They're here, they're up there, and I'll show you later. It's a citywide. There's also one up there. These represent, from what we can tell, that there are 25. There are 48 licensed residential treatment facilities, 48 units on 18 parcels. There are 25 sober living facilities, which are unlicensed facilities that don't provide any medical, non-medical services, on 25 units on 16 parcels. That's a total citywide that we believe are in the area of 73 units on 34 parcels. And so that shows the concentration or the spread of those uses. The next slide. These are the short-term lodging permits that the city has issued. It represents 801 units on 557 parcels. This one right here and this one right here each represent just one rental unit, but they're on one parcel because they're a condo, so there's really only one in each one of those. It may imply that there's more. And then these are the concentration of on the peninsula of the short-term units. Now, one of the things that we did check, and I did check with Glenn Everett, and will have some additional information that the council wants to know. Not all these 801 are actively reporting that they're renting. There's a lesser amount of that, and he can provide that information if you'd like to know. So that gives you an idea of the number of short-term housing and the concentration and density of those. Then the next one, this is just kind of a bigger view, and it's a little harder to see, but this is the sober living on a citywide basis. And as you can see, there's these on the peninsula, and then there's just one more right out over here. And then there's the other ones, there's two up here. And one of these represents the ones that we believe and that are going to operate as a sober living, because so far we don't know if they're licensed at the Clay and Orange. We know that at least 2 of them are, and one other is apparently intending to. And then the next one, the next slide. That is a citywide overview of the same for the short-term lodging permits, which, as you can see, there's one up in this area, and then there's one down here in Pelican Crest, or Pelican Point, I believe. And then the last one, just as an informational piece, shows the short-term lodging permits from 15th Street to Santa Ana River Jetty, and the number in there is 282 permits. What? Okay. Is 282 permits on these orange all the way up there, with that single one up there. And I think there's one single one there. So this highlights the fact that the city already has some form of accepted over the years, and at this point in time permitted, transient uses in the peninsula area that actually have a higher concentration, at least in number, than the recovery homes do. And the increase in numbers is about the same over the same year period from 2002. I do recognize that there's differences, and our outside counsel recognizes that there's difference in these uses. The short-term lodging are mostly busy during the summer, and they may have different impacts, and that the recovery homes may have different impacts on their own. But the purpose of this moratorium is not to regulate any use out of existence, but rather to do land use planning, which is what we have the right to do on uses. And we cannot focus on the residents that are living there. And I guess that concludes my presentation.
Okay, was Glenn going to give a presentation or just respond to questions? Or?
Actually, I don't have a prepared presentation, but earlier today, Councilmember Hanna had asked for some information about the number of facilities that, relative to the ones that are permitted, the number of those facilities that are actually creating TO, transient occupancy tax, that's associated with these vacation rental units. We were able to produce those numbers this evening. Of the 801 registered short-term lodging facilities, 498 of those made transient occupancy tax payments through 2006. 62% of those that are registered. Councilman Hand also asked for some information relative to as far back as we could go. Unfortunately, we've had a data conversion in the system that manages this data, but we were able to go back and compare to 2004. In 2004, we had a total of 612 units registered for vacation rental purposes, and 510 of those, or 83%, were producing transient occupancy tax, and we assumed then they were operating in a vacation rental capacity.
Glenn, approximately how many applications for new short-term lodging permits do you get a year?
We're currently in the process of renewing the permits. It's a biannual renewal that we do, and in the month of April, we send out renewal notices this year to 801 properties that were registered. We see on the average about 30 new properties coming online, if you will, in terms of new facilities. We see far greater number, maybe 100 or more annually, where there's been a change in ownership. Same dwelling unit, but we issue the properties to the individuals.
Yeah, I'm just talking about one where it's a new property, a new permit, not a transfer or a renewal or something.
About 30 a year is what we've seen. But I will point out again that in 2004 we had 612 units registered. Today we have 801 units registered. Give you some sense of what it's been in the last 3 years.
So it's been a lot more than.
It has, and there have been a number of other issues, I think, that have maybe brought that about. In 2004, June of 2004, Council adopted a moratorium on short-term lodging permits in the R1 zone. We know that a number of people applied in advance of the moratorium to to reserve their space, if you will, to operate those facilities. I think it also had the effect in other zones within the city for people to apply for permits, whether they intended to operate them or not, just to have on record with the city the fact that they have registered for vacation rental purposes.
So Glenn, we can speculate about why we might have so many permits at one time or another, but the fact is, one thing that I wanted to verify, the 498, which I think it'd be fair to say you'd classify as active, is that the number of properties that are active, or that's permits that?
The permits, Councilman, are issued to an individual for each dwelling unit. So that count reflects the total number of dwelling units. So if there's a duplex or triplex,
it would be 2. It would count
Correct.
for 2. So, you know, the incidence of these then is, as to locations, I should say, discrete locations, is probably something less. But in any event, what's clear is that the number of active permits has declined in the last couple of years. And so I think that's an important point to understand. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Glenn. Sir, we're not ready for that yet. Take your seat. I'll let you know when it's time for public comment.
Oh.
Thank you. Robin, I've got another question. Assuming that we do put the moratorium in place and we have all these different types of facilities in there, at the other end of the pipeline, when we do, let's say, come up with some type of ordinance or changes in the rules or whatever it is, does it have to be the same for every type of use? I mean, can we?
No.
So we can't craft different ones, and we may find that some uses don't require any modifications at all. And is that a possible outcome?
Yeah, I think that's part of the period of this moratorium, is to try and determine, you know, what is the impacts of the different types of transient uses, transitory uses, the ones that are existing, like the short-term lodging. What are their impacts? Are they long-term? Are they only in the summertime? How do they operate during the year? The other types of transitory uses, like the recovery homes, which operate 12 months out of the year. The anticipated problems that we might have from other types of transient uses that might start setting up in the area that we maybe see happen in other areas, like the probationer or parolee homes, those types of things. So that's the idea, and I've asked legal counsel to look at all those issues and to draft appropriate regulations depending upon the impacts and the evidence that we get from the information that we can get from code enforcement and from police and from other sources, including our residents, to look at what are the appropriate regulations that are necessary for whatever these types of uses are, to try to look at the best way to maintain the residential character of our neighborhoods.
As to the short-term lodging permits, they renew, I guess, biannually
every
now?
2 years.
Every 2 years.
Yeah.
And it was a question I think we discussed a little bit earlier, but I didn't really get a final answer. Maybe Glenn, listen up, Glenn, might have an answer. What happens in a situation where someone has a permit now, they're coming up for renewal? Come on down, Glenn. What's the deadline for renewing your permit?
Mayor Rosansky, the permits are renewed through the month of April, so April 30th is the time to renew your permit. New applicants are subject to the permit, whenever they start to operate the facility.
Okay, so let's say you have a permit now, and you miss your April 30th paying your fee, or whatever has to be done to renew your permit. What happens at that point?
Relative to the moratorium?
No, just as it is now without the moratorium.
There is no penalty for a late, there is no fee associated with the processing of the permit, so there's no penalty payment associated with a late applicant. However, there is, it's a municipal code violation to operate a vacation rental unit without benefit of the short-term lodging permit.
So say that person comes in June 1st and says, I was on vacation, I didn't pay, or there's no payment, you said, right?
Correct.
So they just have to, what do they do? What's the process?
They just fill out a form, about 5-line form that relates who they are and how many people are going to be allowed in the facility at any given time. and we issue a permit.
Okay, so they have to fill out a form to renew the permit.
Correct.
So he or she comes in June 1st and says, okay, you know, I missed the deadline, but I'd like to renew my permit today. You just accept his paperwork?
We take the application and assume that we'll have them disclose whether or not they've operated the facility and are subject to the
let's
transit
assume that
officer
they
test.
haven't.
If they haven't, then there's no penalty. We just take the application, issue the permit.
Okay, what if that permit is in an R1 property where we don't issue new permits any longer, correct?
We deny the permit on that basis then.
So if they don't renew in time, then the permit is denied?
Well, this dates back to June 1 of 2004. Any property that was operating in an R1 zone was able to renew the permit and have been able to renew the permit since. If an R1 zoned property applies for a new permit today, wasn't previously operating prior to the moratorium of June 1st of 2004, they're not eligible to receive a permit, so the permit will be denied on that basis.
So if someone who had a legitimate permit before 2004 lets it lapse, even for a short period of time, that's it. They can't come back again.
The ordinance provides if they were previously permitted, if the location was previously permitted, we may issue a permit subsequent to that, whether there was any lapse between or not.
Okay, so someone who had a valid permit before 2004 misses the April 30th filing, comes in June 1st and says, oops, I forgot to file my form, you're going to give them their permit?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's not considered a new permit, that's just an extension of the old permit?
That's correct.
Is that accurate? Okay. So now let's flash forward to, let's say we put the moratorium in place. Moratorium is not going to change that, right? The person can still come back in, whether we have the new moratorium or not, on new permit issuance? Is that?
Yeah, and let's talk in terms of what we're restricting and what we're not restricting. We're restricting the issuance of short-term lodging permits to a location that wasn't previously permitted.
Right.
If the property that you're applying for, whether in your name or another's name, was previously permitted, we'll issue the permit.
Okay, I just want to get to the situation where someone may have let their permit lapse.
Yes.
Through fault or no fault of their own, whatever, that they're not going to now have to be put in that class of people that are trying to get a new permit. They're just trying to extend their old permit, even though the permit has lapsed.
We'll recognize, and I can be corrected by the city attorney, but as we treated the R1 properties, if there was ever a permit associated with that property, and they make application subsequent to that for a permit, we'll issue the permit.
So, just out of curiosity, what if it's 3 years later? You're still going to issue that permit?
There's no limitation stated in the ordinance. We have a record that if we can reflect that there was a record, or if the applicant can evidence that there was a record of a permit issued prior, we'll honor that.
Okay, and for the other properties, like R2 properties, even a new property owner, someone who wasn't previously permitted can come in and ask for a permit under our existing, pre-moratorium, let's call it.
Correct.
Okay, but with the moratorium, you won't issue a permit to someone who hasn't had a permit in the
Not for 45 days.
Not
correct.
for 45 days under this moratorium. Okay, I think that's all the questions I want to ask of you. And then the last one for Robin. We're supposed to be covering all transitory uses. And another question that we talked about earlier was, and this is transitory uses in in residential zones, correct?
Correct.
So, something like a grocery store obviously can't be in a residential zone. But what about something like a bed and breakfast, which we do allow in our residential zones that doesn't appear to be covered by the moratorium?
It isn't covered by it as it's being specifically listed, but I think that to the extent that it should be specifically listed, we could add it in. I think we defined the transient or the transitory use in a way that would include that type of a use, even though it's not listed, but I don't think it would hurt to include also to the extent that I'm not familiar with, I haven't looked at our regulations to see in what areas that we would permit bed and breakfast, but to the extent that we do, that would also be included.
My recollection is they're specifically allowed in areas on the peninsula that are residential zones. We did that actually to kind of improve things down there. So.
Correct.
So my recommendation is if we do move forward with the moratorium, that we do add language in there that includes those as well, to make sure that we cover any transitory use.
I think I just thought about, I hadn't counted correctly, but I think it's around June, looks like June 7th is the 45-day period.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions of? City Attorney? Nobody? Okay, sir. I'll now open it for public comments.
I got the impression you didn't want me to ever talk. As I was saying, it seems to me strange that you're lumping together short-term lodging with sober living facilities. It seems like it's a clever ploy, but it's goofy because there's a giant difference. I have a short-term living facility, and I rent to families during the summer who want to come to Newport Beach to enjoy the beach, and they're basically a single family that have children, and they enjoy coming for 1 or 2 weeks, and they pay their rent and they're gone. My tenants are much more consistent with the residential community concept than with sober living facilities. If the City Council desires to lump short-term lodging with unlicensed and unpermitted sober living facilities, the city should be democratically fair and tax the sober living facilities. I noticed that your attorney, Robin, got her information regarding our short-term lodging from the Revenue Division because we pay taxes. But none of these short-term sober living facilities pay taxes. So if you're going to be democratically fair, please tax them. And I think that would be fair. Thank you.
Can you just state your name again for the record? Did you catch that before? Oh, you have it? Never mind. She has it.
Ken Bryant.
Oh, thank you, Ken.
Good evening, Mayor Brzezinski. My name is George Schroeder, 35th Street, Newport Beach. I did attend all 5 meetings that were held. I guess 2 of them were here and 3 of them were at the library. And the whole time that we were having those meetings, not once was the issue or the concerns of the residents, the short-term weekly rentals, okay? And then also, I think if we look back at the history of Newport Beach, if we look back to any book that Judge Gardner wrote, or Bill Grungy, or my friend Art Gronsky, if you look at Newport Beach, 1920s, 1930s, what it's going to show you is vacation homes on the beach, short-term rentals on the beach. This isn't why people are here. Okay, there have always been rentals on the beach in Newport Beach. Okay, and I would say there are probably less now than before. What we have now is more compliance because there were unregulated short-term rentals that created problems. Previous councils addressed it, and you passed an ordinance. Okay, I'm holding something in my hand here that says disturbance notification. This notice is in reference to police officers having respond to your property at the person's address. A recurrence for a third time, a recurrence in any 12-month period will result in revocation of your permit to operate a short-term rental unit. They are regulated. Okay, the property manager's name is on the building. Call ABC Property Management. Okay, the next thing I would ask you, is 9 months a short-term rental? Is it? Would you consider 9 months? And you know that map with all those dots on it. Okay, put that map up in November. The short-term rentals are gone. There's a permanent resident, 1 person per bedroom for 9 months. Yeah, I've lived down here for 19 years in the 100 block of 35th Street. Okay, so to lump them in, it's a different use. They are regulated. I'd like to pass these out. You know, so if any of you haven't seen these, where if a person has 3 police calls in 1 year, they get their right to operate as a short-term operator. They can have it revoked. If that was the issue with the group homes, not any of us would be here. Also, if they put a permanent resident in for 9 months and only operate it for 3 months, perhaps we could live with that. Thank you. So I would ask that you separate them out from this ordinance.
Honorable Mayor Brzezinski and council members. My name is Craig Badley. I'm a resident of Newport Beach. I concur with the former speaker. The history of Newport Beach is vacation rentals, short-term rentals. It's been that way for, well, actually since 100 years. the last 50 years especially. And it's interesting to note the discussion about transient occupancy, transient tenants. Turns out the vacation rentals occur in about 3 months of the year. June, July, and August. 80% of all short-term rentals occur in 3 months. And the impact on the peninsula during that time is negligible to the overall general traffic of the area. You have 100,000 people coming to the beach on the weekend. You have about 400 check-ins of the short-term lodging people. The cars that they bring and all is negligible to the overall crowding during those months. As a member of the IREC committee, I too listened to all the public comment, and quite frankly, I didn't hear one person talk about vacation rentals either. I think the reason that people are here and the moratorium is on the table tonight is because of the group homes. Now, it turns out in Newport Beach there's over 9,000 rentals, non-owner occupied homes and dwellings. The amount of permits that we heard today from the lectern here today was maybe 400 and just under 500 licensed or is permitted dwellings. Those aren't actually single-family properties or duplexes. That's probably around 200 and some when you add in the duplex configuration. That is less than 5% of the rental population in the city. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is the coastal dependency of short-term lodging, because it's been in existence for so long. It's basically a coastal commission issue wherein you have access to the public beach. It's been going on for a long time. The makeup and characterization of the neighborhood, the clientele, if you will, of the short-term rental or lodging permits is catered to families, which is similar to the neighborhood that they're entering. In fact, in many cases, the families that they bring are more characteristic of the neighborhood than a lot of the tenants that live in some of these properties. The other thing I think that was mentioned is, what is a short-term rental? Well, it's by the definition, a transient occupant is anybody who exercises occupancy or is entitled to the occupancy by reason of concession permit, right of access license, or other agreement for a period of 30 consecutive calendar days or less. If you have a 31-day or more tenancy, it falls under a different statute, the state of California. Totally has nothing to do with short-term rentals. 9-month rentals is a lease. Has nothing to do with short-term rentals either. Turns out the group homes do not have any short-term rentals as defined by the code. They don't have any transient occupants. They don't have anybody less than 30 days traditionally. They have some ways a lot more than that. So I agree with the former speaker that we ought to bifurcate this issue, particularly if it's going to be passed tonight, this moratorium, in the writing of the ordinances, because quite frankly, they're quite different animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. City Attorney, is anything that we're doing with the moratorium affecting anybody's ability to rent for 9 months? And,
No.
Just as a further clarification for the last two speakers who mentioned our last meetings with regard to the IROC committee as well as City Council, I don't believe that anywhere on any of those agendas was a moratorium, and so there was no discussion about moratoriums in the past as to what a moratorium would apply to or not apply to.
That's correct. Also, the charge of the IROC committee is to look at all different types of transient uses.
And also a clarification that the moratorium would not prevent anyone who has this permit from renting their house. This is only for new
Correct.
applications for this 45-day period.
Correct.
Sir?
Hi, my name's Phil Allen. I've been coming to these meetings and also going to the library. And you know what? I just want to tell you guys the other story. 10 years ago, I attended one of these facilities. And I want you to know that I now have a business. I employ over 40 employees who pay taxes in this town. I'm in a 40% tax bracket myself. I'm a voter. And, you know, these facilities down here absolutely saved my life. And We weren't throwing cigarette butts in your guys' yards. They were extremely strict on how we acted down here. We couldn't have cars. They made me ride a frickin' bicycle everywhere I went. So I just want you guys to hear the other story, that recovery does work, it does happen, and all I hear is the negative stuff. And you know what? There's some real winners in this room and that this has happened for. And I wanted the city council to know that, and I wanted these people to know that too. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Pete Anderson. I'm a homeowner down on the 16th block of the peninsula. I've been down there for 33 years. Several people mentioned that. First of all, I want to tell you that I can understand why you group together the short-term rentals with the other parts of this, including the recovery homes. I think it's a reasonable way to look at it. And legally, it's probably the way you have to go. Several people mentioned that nobody brought up the issue of short-term rentals. There was no question about that. Well, part of the reason is that none of us really knew that that was going to be on. And I can tell you that I think it's time that we look at short-term rentals. It's not, even though it's, we've had these for 100 years down in Newport Beach on the peninsula, doesn't mean that there aren't problems with these rentals. And it isn't time for us to perhaps take a look at them and see if they are affecting our quality of life. So I just want to say that there's an opinion on the other side of this issue of short-term rentals, and I agree that this should be also looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Denise Oberman, and firstly, I'd like to thank the council for addressing this issue and really taking a committal approach to looking at, and hopefully a systematic and constructive one, to looking at and resolving the issue of management of land uses, a key element of which is the overconcentration of group homes on the peninsula. I did earlier submit to the city clerk, Laverne, a petition for a moratorium on all types of group homes, not singling out any particular type, but the use of group homes, that was signed by over 400 full-time residents and homeowners of Newport Beach, and most of them being in the various areas of the Balboa Peninsula, as well as Newport Heights, some in other areas of Newport Beach, and more are coming. So, council and city staff, if you have any doubt as to what the will of the people is, your constituents, relative to this matter, please do not. I know you don't see all of those people here, and by the way, we appreciate your changing the order of the agenda items. I know it's as tough on you as it is on us. But more importantly, I was surprised to learn that the city has actually taken account of where its best guess or best estimate of where there may be various types of group homes, and we all know by this point in time that there are a number of different types. Part of the problem is we don't even all know exactly what the types are, because there is no regulation of anything, and there's no tracking or monitoring of this type of use in Newport Beach. And so we have no idea. There may be houses that are parolee houses. There may be houses where people are required to have residential treatment, and houses which are subject to operational regulations by the state or county agencies, depending upon what type of facilities there are. The city doesn't know. And a number of people worked on the map, and Robin and city council and staff, we appreciate your endeavoring to find out how many there are. But we really need to have a mechanism as a city that we can track our uses and systematically manage them. So I'm hoping that one of the key objectives during this moratorium period is to track these. Secondly, and I'll try to not be long-winded, I have a tendency to be, we've got to characterize the uses, and the uses that have evolved, but also probably more importantly, what are the uses that are consistent with the objectives and the philosophy of our general plan? And we have districts, particularly in the Newport Beach coastal communities, that are very challenging with their uses. They haven't developed as a process of a planned community. They've evolved. And the reason that the people really pay a premium and commit to having their families here, to growing old here, to putting their life savings into establishing homes here, whether they're here on a full-time basis or for their summer or for their weekends or whatever, they have the right to live in a community that they feel safe in, that has a proper, clean environment, and an environment that is not an institutional one. So I encourage the council to work diligently to establish revised ordinances, various regulatory policy and practice, and to do it with due public process so we really can accomplish and maintain what the objectives of the general plan are and serve the will of the people consistent with the sound policy. I thank you very much, and we welcome the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you.
Hi, Joanne Pittman, 216 33rd Street. I've been listening to what's transpired, and I had a lot of questions. I think a lot of them were answered. My understanding is that the purpose of the moratorium is to allow the city a time frame to conduct a study as to the impact of short-term housing as well as residential facilities, rehab facilities. I believe I can wrap my mind around the idea that because of legal issues, we're concerned about discriminatory issues as far as protected classes of people with disabilities, with the Fair Housing Act and with disabilities. Is that correct? Because
we're concerned about evaluating uses and not the people that live in the uses.
Exactly. And so what I'm hearing is that there are certain protected classes, and those protected classes will be able to continue to run their facilities during this moratorium period and continue to apply. Really what's going to happen is I understand why you feel that you cannot bifurcate the matter, but the truth of the matter is if you do put this moratorium into effect, who you are going to be hurting are the homeowners who want to sell their properties, the homeowners who currently have inventory on the market for sale or are looking at a resale market time already now of 120 to 150 days, sometimes more, depending on the price point, and also the potential people who want to come here and invest and legitimately contribute to the commerce that we enjoy here in the resort community of Newport Beach. So what will happen is when you're working with buyers and sellers in this marketplace during the 45-day moratorium, they're going to hear 45 days also with no promise as to what's going to happen after the 45 days. And I can assure you it will not build confidence in bringing commerce here to our city. So my question is, why do we actually need a 45-day moratorium? I'm assuming that the IROC committee can most certainly conduct the study without imposing a moratorium, which really won't stop the rehab facilities at all. So in that 45 days, what's supposed to be accomplished really isn't being accomplished. It's actually hurting the people who legitimately want to run business in the city and contribute to revenue. So I would think that if the city were to reimpose the CUP, where we can regulate and do a continued use permit, I don't know why that was taken off. I don't know that. But I would think that if that was put in place for the rehab facilities, and maybe the city could study that during this process, and might be a way that we can bifurcate those two matters. So my proposal would be not to impose a 45-day moratorium, because I don't think the impact upon our buyers and sellers and our homeowners has really been considered. And that 45-day, we're going into the peak market time in Newport Beach on the peninsula for resale and sell of property. We're going into the peak market time for applying for permits for weeklies. The peak time for weeklies will start the last week of May. And this is not the time to be taking that ability away from our marketplace. And it won't do anything to stop the what's happening with our rehab facilities that are here now. So 45-day moratorium, I don't see the necessity of it. You can still have your study. You can still study the impact. So that would be my suggestion, my proposal for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
we meet again. Dr. Linda Orozco. I'm a professor of educational leadership at Cal State Fullerton. And I say that, I'm a 25-year resident of Newport Beach. I say that because I'm an academic. I deal with data, I deal with leadership and administration, and I've never seen a poorer example of that happening in the last 3 to 4 years. I want to share 3 titles with you of articles. LA Times, November 03. Neighbors are bothered by rehab center. Several complaints about noise and traffic from residential treatment facilities. Neighbors complaining. In Daily Pilot, May 04, Neighbors Rehab Center battle over zoning. And Daily Pilot, November of 03, City will look into regulating drug rehab. It's just a tiny first step, but neighbors of a drug rehab center on Balboa Peninsula hope that Wednesday's City Council vote will begin to look into ways to regulate residential treatment centers and will go a long way toward controlling noise and other nuisances. The staff and council members warned residents at the Wednesday night vote. It does authorize staff to begin looking at the matter and consider changes. This may be really predictive. This is just the first step in a process that may lead nowhere, City Attorney Bob Burnham cautioned residents who were eager for action. I stand before you with a few facts. First, currently there were in 03 5 licensed properties that were residential treatment facilities by the state of California in Newport Beach. Currently there are 24. There are 24 properties licensed in the city of Newport Beach as residential treatment facilities for drug addicts and alcoholics. The 24 properties total 44 units. How do I know? That is on the state's website for licensing, and as a matter of fact, the city should know how many there are because the city fire marshal must sign a fire clearance for each and every property that is licensed by the city of Newport, that is licensed by the state alcoholic and drug programs. So for the city attorney herself to say, we don't know where these are, amazes me. When you must sign the fire clearance every 2 years, they renew the license with alcohol and drug programs. Secondly, I'm really concerned about the muddy terminology going around. The terminology is not muddy at the state level. A sober living facility, a sober living home, means no treatment. The person has recovered. They are to live there exclusively. They cannot be required to go to a meeting, not even AA, on the site or off the site. To my knowledge, there is not a single sober living facility in the city of Newport Beach, and there hasn't been for the 3.5 years I've been working on this problem. There's no money in it. The state alcohol and drug programs requires a state license if you have one residential alcoholic or drug addict in treatment, whether the treatment happens on that site or off that site. California alcohol and drug programs requires a review of the bedding, the storage, the application and use of medications, the testing, tuberculosis testing, and a lot of other things that are happening with each resident addict. That is not happening in many of the homes going on here. So we've got a real muddiness, and a lot of our residential treatment facilities that are not licensed want to fly under the radar and call themselves sober living. They're not sober living. Let me kind of talk about where we're going from here. We had five properties in 03. We have 24 now, totaling 44 units. There is one in the city of Irvine. They have the same regulations, at least they did. We did. I think the city, they didn't have the same city attorney, however. So maybe the Burnham connection is something we should all look at. Currently, there were 29% of all state licenses issued in the state of California in 18-month period. 29% of all state licenses for rehab facilities in California were issued to the city of Newport Beach. I'll say it again, 29% of all state licenses issued in an 18-month period were issued to the city of Newport Beach, yet Newport Beach is only 1% of the California population. Something's wrong. 18% of all state licensed rehab homes in Orange County are in the city of Newport Beach. Newport Beach is only 3% of Orange County, yet we have 18% of all of Orange County's rehab houses. Something's wrong. Let me go back to who these people are. In 2004, an administrator with the state alcohol and drug programs met with a very concerned group in my home and stated, 90% of the individuals in these residential treatment facilities hold criminal convictions.
Ma'am, your time is up.
How is that possible? 5 minutes?
5 minutes. Thank you. Just for clarification purposes, City Attorney, Ms. Orozco mentioned that there's 24 licensed facilities on the ADP website. That represents, or 44 properties, I think she said. Or are those all reflected on your exhibit?
Yes.
And I'd also like to mention that, because I know a lot of people have been focusing on Mr. Burnham and when he was the city attorney here, and that Mr. Orozco pointed out that the city of Irvine doesn't have, only has one. I would also like to point out that the attorneys that prepared the FEP legislation for us back in 2004, Rutan and Tucker, are also the city attorney for the city of Irvine. Ms. Miller? Thank you. Ms. Miller?
We have 48 units on 18 parcels of property are identified as licensed residential treatment facilities, so I don't know when I said I didn't know where the licensed treatment facilities were.
Good evening, Lori Morris, West Newport. And to clarify that, different direction was given to the city of Newport Beach than it was to the city of Irvine or the city of Orange. I would like to thank the council for putting this item on the consent calendar. Enacting this moratorium will allow residents to work with the city in a good faith manner and give time to put together correct and viable ordinances that are non-discriminatory, balanced, and address overconcentration. This ensures all residents who are concerned or have had their quality of life impacted by this overconcentration a voice, and allow good ordinances to mitigate these concerns. Over 400 residents signed a petition to help this council understand that group homes are the issue at hand. Over 400 residents wanted this council to know how important a 40-day, 5-day moratorium is, and to speak to those quality of life issues and bring about change that is fair to everyone. And 73 group homes that the city comes up with, mostly located on the peninsula, would still constitute an overconcentration. The issue of combining two different types of uses of property, whether intentional or unintentional, is detrimental to this process of making good ordinances. These are two separate issues, and as such, I take exception to adding on to this moratorium. It will be challenging enough without the added weight of vacation weekly rentals, which already have a process and an avenue to mitigate residents' concerned, as George said. You can call the police, you can call the owners, you can find the owners, you can enact eviction notices. There are a host of other ways that I'm sure there are other people here that are can better speak to that. These processes of mitigation do not apply to the group home industry. Please separate these two different uses of land so that we can have a successful dialogue in good faith rather than smoke screens or red herrings thrown in at the last minute. And I would like to say, wow, how many attorneys there are for the rehab businesses kind of makes you wonder how much money really needs to be protected in this city. Thank you.
My name is Leslie Ellis. I live in Newport. I have a question that after the restriction after 45 days, if someone is buying a new property in Newport Beach, are they going to be issuing permits for rentals, or will that, I mean, does anybody know that yet, or, I mean, the 45-day, the 45...
Do you mean a newly built property?
No, let's say there's someone that's going to buy a property and become a landlord.
Okay.
After your 45-day permit restriction, let's say in June 7th, when this is up, will they be issued a city permit? Or is that unknown? Just curious.
It is unknown at this time, but that's one possibility.
Because will that, do you think, I mean, I'm just curious about affecting buying and selling of, you know, people's properties at this time. Obviously, you can transfer the permit if you have a property now with a permit, but then after the moratorium, is that like confusing or no one, we don't know yet?
Well, ma'am, I believe the whole idea of the moratorium is to keep the status quo as it is now give the city the time to do the research that we need to do and come up with the solutions or the remedies that we think are appropriate based upon the research that's been done. You know, in the realm of possibilities, sure, we could stop issuing permits. Whether that will happen, you know, I can't say 100% yes or no today. You know, so as the city attorney said, we can't give you an answer. I would be surprised if that's the result, but it could be the result depending on what the impacts are and what we find.
Okay, I'm just, because I'm wondering if someone's going to buy something and become a landlord, maybe they won't want to buy in Newport because that's going to be a problem. I mean, I don't know. So
It's certainly
not
a possibility, ma'am. That's why it's for 45 days. Well, if we want to extend it any further, we'll have to come back and have another hearing to extend it further. It is a drastic measure, and it's not done lightly. I mean, I don't know how many moratoriums the city has put in place in 100 years that we've been in existence, but I imagine I could probably count it on one hand.
Is it possible to do a study and not have a moratorium, or that's not even considered?
Well, certainly that's the debate tonight.
The debate. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Rush again. I'd like to thank the council for putting this on the floor. I have a couple quick questions. Robin, can you please tell me, when you were discussing facilities, you said, I think it was 48 licensed and 25 unlicensed? And what were your definitions of facilities?
Our definitions were per the ADP website.
Okay, so let's say a facility is in an R1, that's one facility. What about if you have a duplex fully occupied on both units?
That's why I say 48 units on 18 parcels. So that would
So a
imply-
duplex would account
that
for
would-
two?
That would account for two,
Okay.
or a triplex would account for three, or,
Okay.
yeah.
And then over the 45-day moratorium period, how would the process of doing investigation, analysis, developing laws that hopefully we can put in place at the end of 45 days, or how would that process take place?
The goal is, intent is to have outside counsel work with, I'm going to have them work with Aram Harp and with our planning department.
And at what point do you bring in IROC and planning department and individuals who have a real interest in this issue? I mean, it's been a real problem in the last several times we've brought initial amendments or ordinances to the floor. Things have a tendency to get kind of rammed through without having preliminary discussions with the community, with other organizations, other units that have been set up to address this stuff. The IROC committee specifically. You were saying all along that we would have the initial amendment go before the IROC and then planning, and there'd be plenty of time for input. Now it's part of this moratorium. It's being rammed through.
That's up to the council. I was asked to do a moratorium. That's what we're doing.
No, I understand that, but was there any discussion about how the process was going to look?
The discussion is we have 30 days to come up with a ordinance that addresses quite a few things, and that my office will be working with outside counsel and with the planning department.
So at what point would it come before IROC?
I don't know if the council, it's up to the council how they want to process it after
All right, at
that.
what point would it come before the community, before community individuals?
If it doesn't go to the IROC, the next point would be for it to go to the planning commission.
Bob, one of the things that we need to decide very quickly here is what the process will be. Clearly, we want to make sure that there's opportunity for public input to that process. I personally also, however, would like to see if we can identify a process that will allow an expedited treatment of this so that we can arrive at answers as quickly as possible and in respect of specific ordinances that may be appropriate here. So we need to decide the process here as quickly as possible.
Is this the forum for deciding it? Is this the forum for discussing the process, or once we vote on this as an issue, is the process decided for us?
Bob, certainly if you have some recommendations as to the process, we'd love to hear them, or if you want to submit them in writing to the city attorney, that would be great.
As long as you're open to input from the community as to the process, because in the past we have not had any input on the process, none. That was the purpose of the IROC.
I can assure you that we will be open to input from the community, and one of the things that we need to figure out how to do here is to get that input as rapidly as possible.
Great.
And to produce a result. What we're after here are results.
Right.
So.
All right. Thank you very much. I have one last point. Mayor Rosansky, you mentioned a moment ago that Irvine has the same city attorney as did write the laws for us here pursuant to Ordinance 2004-16. I'd like to point out that they have no FEP there, and they use a CUP for 7 and over. As a matter of fact, if you plug in federal exception permit to Google, you absolutely come up with no other place in the entire country that uses this approach. Okay, go ahead, Robin.
I need to respond to this because there's this city in 2004 had, I think it was 600 short-term lodging permits. The problem that we had back in 2004, the problem that we have today, is that we have a residentially zoned community that we allow a transient use. We have multiple properties that we allow to have short-term lodging. It's a transitory use. Irvine doesn't have that many short-term rentals in the city of Irvine. Murrieta doesn't have that many short-term rentals. They do not have a history of having residentially zoned property being used for an intense, even if it's 3 months a year, program. And that is the difference that this city has that other cities do not have. We also have apparently a recovery community that wants to recover in the same places that other families want to come and vacation.
That wasn't my point. My point was that no other place in the country exists this type of law, and I'm sure that there's many other locations in the country that have transitory uses just like ours. The point I'm trying to make is if the city attorney of Irvine is the same person that drafted our current 2004-16, why doesn't he take the 2004-16 and use it for his own city? He doesn't. It's experimental law. It's used in us first. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. It's experimental law.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Your 5 minutes are well exceeded.
Hi, my name's Jane Chernowski. I'm a 21-year resident of the 300 block of 34th Street. I went home today with a petition, and in under 15 minutes I had almost a dozen signatures from my neighbors regarding the halfway houses. We have 2 duplexes directly across the street from us. 3 of the 4 units are taken by the rehab places. I didn't see them on your map, but I couldn't see the map that well. Memorial Day of last year, they had their windows smashed out by someone throwing beer bottles. On Labor Day, I had to call the police or the fire department because they had thrown cigarette butts in a mop bucket and lit their balcony on fire. About 2 weeks ago, we had one of them threw eggs at all of the houses in the neighborhood. I understand he was kicked out. But their presence in our neighborhood has affected our quality of life in a negative way, in a big negative way. And I would also like to ask how much revenue the short-term lodging permits provide for the city of Newport Beach as opposed to the revenue provided by the rehab houses. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. My name is David Diamond. I've been a resident of the city of Newport Beach for over 30 years. And I did not plan on speaking today, but I'm quite upset about what I'm hearing here today. In the first place, it's well-settled law that you cannot serve 2 masters, particularly for an attorney. If an attorney is representing a client, he cannot have any involvement with someone who has interests that are opposed to that client's interest. It appears here that we're taking a very cavalier look at the former city attorney, and we're holding him to a standard of proving there was a conflict of interest. But there obviously was an individual who was directing how this city dealt with a major problem. Robin has indicated that we allow short-term rentals in the city of Newport Beach. Therefore, we are opening the door to this problem. The city of Newport Beach regulates short-term rentals. In any city, people can rent, unless it's an R1 zone where they don't allow rentals. They can rent for 30 days. They can rent for a week. They can rent for 60 days. So what we've done is tried to regulate what is going on, and now that's being used to say, well, therefore, we've opened a door, created an unusual situation that makes us more responsible and less able to regulate these kinds of facilities that are causing a great deal of problem. We have a gentleman here who said he's recovered in one of these homes many years ago. He said they didn't throw cigarette butts on the neighboring homes. I'll take him at his word. But the home I live next to, they throw cigar butts into our property. They throw beer cans onto our property. Beer cans, people involved in a rehabilitation home. I found a 12-step book lit on fire and placed into one of my plastic trash cans. This is unusual. I've seen what I believe are drug dealings going on at the home next door to me. Robin provided some maps, and I understand. I was just at the eye doctor today, and he says I have 20/20 corrected vision, and I could not make out those maps. I would like to see that those maps are made available to people who have interest, and that they should be posted on a web page that makes them available for citizens of this city. I believe that we can, with this information, we can look at the homes that have been identified and licensed by the city and the myriad of different kinds of flop houses that are operating within our city that may not have been identified and that the city is unaware of. This will allow us to reconcile maps that individuals have made with maps that the city is using. I would like to see that records of police contact are made with homes that are involved in these rehabilitation activities. I don't know how you can do that if we haven't identified these homes. So therefore, I'm quite concerned. I will say that I saw this council very responsive to the needs and desires of probably hundreds of people who want to preserve a golf course which the city has no control over. But we have thousands of people living in this community that are suffering, and I don't get the same feeling that you want to solve our problem. Thank you very much.
Well, the next person's coming up. I would like to say that we did resolve the woman's problem with the water bill, and that's been taken care of. So we did solve one suffering person's problem. Sir.
Good evening, Mayor, member of the City Council. I'm Michael Titus. I'm an attorney with Jackson, DeMarco, Titus, and Peckinpah. I'm the chair of the Land Use Department. I've handled these group home issues in other jurisdictions as well as this jurisdiction. As you know, I represent a number of members of the community. In fact, on March 13th, I appeared in front of you requesting that the city enter into a moratorium. So we're obviously happy that the city has taken this step forward. However, the group that we represent do not believe that the summer vacation rentals really fall into the same category as these more institutional group home issues evolve. In the next 45 days, I hope the city will look into it and come to that same conclusion. I mean, it's obvious. The rental homes, they're all regulated. Unfortunately, the group homes are not. In fact, since 2004, they're essentially unregulated, and that's why the citizens hired my firm, because they feel as though that regulation needs to be put in place. They want us to vigorously represent them, and we will do so. I would like to point out that in the proposed ordinance, I'm assuming it includes not just new uses, but expanded uses. There are parts of the ordinance which seem to discuss that, but it may be more clarified that any expansion in the current use would also require some type of reasonable accommodation. If you have any questions, we'd like to make ourselves available to assist the city and staff, and we'd like to endeavor for the city to come up with a way for community involvement so that members of the community who spoke today can feel as though they're involved in this process, because this is a very adversarial proceeding between two different groups here in the city. But I do want to clarify one thing, because I have heard it in the audience, and you may not have heard during this proceeding. This is a 45-day moratorium. I think you should make clear that at the end of 45 days, unless you have another hearing, the moratorium is lifted. And I think some people in the audience seem to believe this moratorium goes longer than that, but I think you should make it clear that there has to be another hearing for an extension of that moratorium. And with that involved, that is why the people I represent believe that time is of the essence here. They do want to move quickly on the new ordinance, and they would like to move faster and like to get direction from council to staff to both meet with the community members and to move it quickly. And as for the map that the CRC, I know that staff mentioned that the CRC had concerns about the map that the citizens have put together. CRC wrote me a letter saying that the map may be somewhat inaccurate as it involves CRC. So I wrote them a letter back saying, okay, if there's anything in that map that's inaccurate, you let us know, and we'll be happy to not only change the map or advise the people who told us about it, but to actually republish the map with any changes. We never got a response from CRC or anybody saying that the map was all in error. So I understand it's difficult for staff to go to home to check to see whether these particular uses exist. The neighbors can go and they can check. We invite anybody in the sober living, CRC, any community group home, if they find a problem with that map, contact the neighbors. They'd be happy to revise that map to accommodate it. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, I'll bring that back to council. Sir?
My name is Edward Dilks. I'm an attorney, and I represent CRC Healthcare, which is the owner of Sober Living by the Sea. We have some other factual data that we'd like to show you. There were statements tonight that described impacts of crime and things like that, and we'd like to show you a board that gives you a look at several blocks, a before and after comparison, and pretty much of a side-by-side comparison. I think what it'll show you is that, at least with properties owned by Sober Living by the Sea, the amount of crime, the calls for service, none of those things are even a fraction as great as they are for the surrounding properties. That there may, in fact, be on that block calls for service, but they're not numerous at the facilities owned by Sober Living by the Sea. The calls are actually on other parcels on those blocks that have nothing to do with our operation of the property. And what I'm going to do is turn this over to Brian, who will very quickly run you through those studies.
Do you have smaller copies of that we could look at?
We're going to leave this.
We do not, but we're going to leave the exhibit with you.
I'm Brian Burke from Sober Living by the Sea, and I apologize. This may be difficult to see, but we are going to leave it here for your review afterwards. You want me to turn it? I also apologize. This presentation isn't quite as good as Glenn's. And I must congratulate him for his presentation, and he did list some sober homes that we weren't aware of, and his count, as far as we can tell, sounds very accurate. As far as this, what we've done in terms of this map is we've picked two blocks where we have a home. We have a home on 43rd and Balboa, and we have two homes on the corner of 40th and Seashore. And the police department has been so kind as to offer us calls to service for the surrounding areas. What we've done is on our house on 43rd Street, there has actually been no calls to service in the last 2 years. As other houses on this block, there are as many as 37 calls to service for a home that is 4 doors away. On 40th Street, we have two homes on the corner of 40th and Seashore, and it's determined through police records that calls to service over the last 2 years have been 7 for 3960 Seashore Drive and 1 call to service for 112 40th Street. Calls to service in the surrounding area go as high as directly across the street. There was 28 calls to service over the last 2 years to one particular house, many over 10. So it simply shows that police activity is certainly no higher at a soap recovery facility than it is in any other home in the neighborhood. Also, we do rent 5 apartments at 5515 River Avenue. That's the Las Brisas Apartments. It's a 50-plus apartment building, 50-plus units. And there, over the past 2 years, there has been 30 calls to service to this particular building. One of those calls was to one of our units, one of the 5. All 29 were to other units. The one call that was to our service was generated by us on the 4th of July for a neighboring unit that was having a party. Also, we rent a home, a duplex, at 5004 Neptune Avenue. We've been renting that for about a year now. Prior to us renting that facility, there were 17 calls to service over the year prior. Of those 17 calls, 13 of those were for loud disturbances, loud parties, things of that nature, and a few arrests. Since we have taken it over, there have been 8 calls to service. 6 of those calls were were from parties in the neighborhood where they had parked in our driveway, and we called. So, in summary, it shows again that the calls to service in our particular facilities appear to be down from our records, from our checking. Also, there is some concern about sales, property values, owners' property values in the area. And we've done 3 comparisons where the fact of the matter is that the house directly next to a sober living facility or across the street from a sober living facility has actually sold for more than any other house on the block. And these sales are right here for your. I put together a package for you of all the supporting data provided to me by the Revenue Department here of vacation permit, short-term lodging permits, as well as calls to service from the police department, and I'll provide that to you for your review. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question or two.
Sure.
First off, I guess the first question is for the city attorney. My understanding is we are to be here to be focused on uses and impacts from uses of the property. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, but with regard to the maps that you're showing there, there were apparently police calls on other properties. Do you know what the nature of the use of those other properties were that received those police calls?
What we found in this particular neighborhood is that most of the houses are income properties of some type. There's some type of rental. Probably about 70% of the homes are. Some are clearly
is it conceivable that some of
vacation
those
rentals.
properties might be group home properties?
They are not group home properties. Not on this. Not on this particular.
You've been able
map.
to determine that.
Yes, these are on our block. These are on our block where we lease properties. These are on a block where we lease properties. So we are aware of the other. Sober Living by the Sea has been here for 20 years in Newport Beach. Over 20 years. These 2 houses right here we have leased for over 13 years in a row. This unit, this property right here on 43rd Street, we have leased for over 5 years. Sober Living by the Sea has an excellent reputation. I get calls every week from property owners wanting to lease to Sober Living by the Sea.
Sir, I'm not challenging the veracity of the facts that you presented here tonight. I'm just trying to understand more carefully what the impacts are in some of these surrounding homes and whether or not those impacts may be related to uses of those homes that we're concerned with.
Sure. Absolutely.
And so you've apparently been able to find information that others of us have had a hard time finding, and I'm just wondering how.
That information is provided by the police department. You simply got to request.
No, I don't mean with regard to police calls. I'm talking about with regard to the use of the home, the use of the property.
Glenn I think, was able to, or the attorney's office was able to determine which homes in the area are, in fact, sober living homes and treatment facilities. To the best of my knowledge, that map and the numbers that were quoted here earlier tonight are accurate. As a matter of fact, you have discovered some homes that we were not aware of, like up in the Santa Ana Heights. And
Glen, you mean Glen Ever Road?
Glen Ever Road, yes. You put out the
Okay.
presentation, am I correct?
The other piece of the answer is that within the sober living community, everybody pretty much knows everybody else's facilities. And when there was any question, Brian actually physically contacted the property to check it out and to find out what the use was. So that as to those 2 blocks, we're absolutely certain what the specific uses were. And there were no sober living uses in any of those blocks.
Speaking of the 100 block of 43rd Street between Balboa and Seashore Drive, and the 100 block of 40th Street between Seashore Drive and Balboa. And you may come up and look at this.
Sir, this is not a time for going under oath. Please take your seat. You had your opportunity to speak. Sir, please take your, no, you can't. This is not a time to respond. If you want to talk about it outside, you're more than welcome to discuss it with the gentleman.
Okay, the difficulty that we have had, Mr. Titus described this as an adversarial proceeding. This is not an adversarial proceeding at all. Sober Living by the Sea would like to understand, as much as I think the city would like to understand, what the legitimate problems are and to fashion solutions for them. The difficulty is that there's been very little information brought forward to give anybody a clue. And so we actually took all of Mr. Burke's time to put all of this information together, and it's just a monumental amount of work because we wanted to get some idea what the impacts were. And it turns out that in every place that we looked, the number of calls for service is less on the average for a Sober Living by the Sea facility than it is for the properties that surround it and the other properties within the block. By far the largest number of calls are for rental properties, and the number of calls for single-family homes are in the same order as Sober Living by the Seas. But the reality is those impacts are absolutely minimal. The impacts on traffic are minimal because Sober Living by the Sea people ride bikes. There are 5 vans. They pick up a very small number of people who are handicapped, and on days that it rains, they're busier because they got to pick everybody up. There are virtually no calls for service at any of these facilities that involve activities on those sites, and that's really what's been so troubling. My client would very much like to help in any way it can to solve legitimate and documented problems which in fact can be solved. In that regard, if there really are places where there's a problem, we've actively gone out and looked. Now, let me tell you a story. I got chewed out one night about a month ago for intimidating a lady who stood up here and talked about a gang house. There's a gang house off of River between 38th and 39th. And truth is, we thought, gee, many Christmas, if that's there, nobody knows it's there. So, I mean, there are people who have walked as many blocks as there are around there to find this facility and never have. The address that she provided, in fact, has a family that lives in the bottom floor and 4 unrelated men, all of whom have jobs and work, and none of whom have any gang affiliations at all. It's not a gang house. It just isn't. There probably are properties.
You're going to need to wrap it up here.
10 seconds. There probably really are properties that are problematic. Ms. Pittman described something that no one should have to live next to. Mr. David Diamond described a property which no one should have to live next to. And I don't know anything about either of those properties, but I'm assuming their representations are accurate. That's a code enforcement problem. And and you focus your attention on that one property. This is not something for which a broad solution that makes a mess of sober living and makes a mess of summer rentals and makes a mess of a number of other uses is even worth your time. It's you know, if you really want to keep looking at this, send it back to IROC and focus on specific addresses for which there are specific problems. You can change the environment if you do that. This is not going to help anybody, and it's going to hurt a lot of people trying to sell a house.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else?
In light of the fact they've taken well more than 10 minutes, may I be allowed to speak for 2 minutes on just respond to a couple of
Sure.
Thank you.
2 minutes.
Titus. Yes, Michael Titus on behalf of a number of the neighbors. You know, I understand they want to be the last one to speak, and they will give anecdotal comments as to what the evidence is. That's what we should do in the next 45 days, is analyze what the evidence is. My suggestion is they made the assertion that no facts have been presented. There have been the March 13th hearing. There have been the IROC hearings. There have been plenty of hearings, all of which I would like to incorporate into the record here, showing what the neighbors' complaints are. I wrote a letter to CRC saying, tell me more information. Let them give us the list of all their facilities in Newport Beach. That would certainly make it a lot easier. And if they have a tight community, give us a list of all the communities, all these facilities that are in the community. That would help everybody go through this process. So I'd like to make that offer, and if they take it, that certainly make the 45 days much more profitable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this matter before I permanently close the public hearing? Sir, please sit down. Mr. Liskin is at the
My name's
podium.
Max Liskin, and having a background of dealing with many lawyers, I'd just like to comment that it's very difficult to come up with one metric, calls of service, to say what happens in a community. I think that what the council's doing is great. We're going to look at a lot of other things. And I think the people here who are representing Sober Living by the Sea must understand that this is where we live. And police calls are only one metric of how something like Sober Living by the Sea or rehab or any other activity in a city impacts it. And I really believe that we are trying very hard to get to the bottom of this, but to have presentations that focus on one metric is really a disservice to everyone in the room. And further, I'd like to say it's very surprising to me that we live in California, which for generations has been the place where people can do what they want to do and it's accepted. There must be some truth to what my fellow citizens are saying about rehab and have a problem with it to have such a strong reaction. By nature, we embrace the surf community, we embrace alternate cultures. Why are we reacting this way to rehab? Let's find the reason. And again, to focus on police calls, most people in this town don't call the cops when there's a problem. We live with it. This is clearly something we're having a problem living with. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Sir, did you want to speak? Have you already spoken on this matter?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I wasn't on parole.
Thank you. You seem like a very stand-up guy. I appreciate that. Ma'am, I think you've already... No, we're not having duplicates here. There's no redirect. This is not a court of law. Even though I am an attorney as well, this is not a court of law, unless I'm asking the questions. Okay? Anybody else? Okay. I'm going to close the public comment section. I'll bring this back to council. Does council have any further questions of staff? Any further clarifications? Councilman Curry.
Can I ask, Robin, during the course of the testimony, there were a lot of ideas sort of tossed out, and can we just maybe very quickly deal with some of these questions, because I know the audience at home has probably got some questions based on this. First of all, is it possible that sober living facilities can be assessed the transient occupancy tax?
Transient occupancy taxes are assessable for stays of 30 days or less. So to the extent that they would have people staying there for less than 30 days, then I think we could apply the same regulation to them. It's my understanding that they don't, that their average stays are approximately 45 to 60 days, which is why we describe the transitory uses of an average stay of less than 90 days.
Okay. You know, I know the folks out in the audience and the people watching at home have got to be immensely frustrated. And I know the residents are frustrated. And property owners who have rental property are tremendously frustrated tonight. Even the sober living folks are frustrated. And I got to tell you, there's nobody more frustrated than the six of us sitting up here trying to come up with a solution for this problem, which seems to defy all logic and reason. Somebody's videographing the meeting today so that they can depose people for whatever statements they make on whichever way we make this decision. The city attorney is working as hard as she possibly can to give us an option that will be litigation-proof and protect the taxpayers in the event of subsequent legal action. Our heart goes out to everybody, both the recovering folks who need these services and the people who are living in neighborhoods that are having unconscionable problems that they have to deal with on a day-in and day-out basis. And we are grappling to try and find a solution. And like with a lot of controversial solutions, there's apparently going to be some collateral issues that relate to this one, relate to property owners and people who are just trying to rent their home out for the summer. And we've got to decide what that trade-off is or should be tonight. And I frankly don't know yet where I'm going to be on this. But let me just tell you what, if you're out there and you're frustrated by this, you're not alone. And you know, we have got to find a way, find a forum. And one of the frustrating things is that people can come up and they can say things, and some of them really need to be responded to. Some of them are probably overreaching on both sides. And we're not able to sort of react and communicate back to the community to have dialogue about that. And that leads to misunderstanding on both sides of this issue. And that, for me, is one of the most frustrating things about it. So I'll just say to everybody concerned here, we hear you, and we're trying to do the best we can.
I'd like to move that we adopt the ordinance
I'll
as it
second
is.
Okay, is there anybody else that have some say? Is there any other further comment?
No, what did Nancy say?
Oh, she's recommending adoption of the ordinance.
Oh, move the adoption as
Yeah, as is.
Well, I've got a couple of questions here. Robin, what in your report you used a couple of terms that confused me here a little bit. Did you use the term single-family uses, and then you used the term single housekeeping unit. What's the difference between the two?
A single-family use is defined as a use where it's a single housekeeping unit is a term that is kind of came out of the concept of family after the Adamson v. Santa Barbara case, which held that a city cannot regulate residency of a unit as a family as having some sort of relationship, blood relationship. And so the concept is in general planning is that you deal with people that live in a residential use have to live together as a single housekeeping unit with the intent of living together as a single housekeeping unit. That is the general standard for what a residential use is. So those are exempted because that is that is just generally the basis for why you set up a residential district.
Okay. And then another question is, can you, we've had a lot of testimony on the harm that this ordinance would potentially cause to the short-term lodging industry, if you will. Can you succinctly just state what the restrictions are going to be during the 45-day period? Just restate it again.
The restrictions will be not to issue during that period of time short-term lodging permit for new addresses, new locations or units that have not previously had a short-term lodging permit before.
And that's it?
That's it.
Okay.
So when you say new, that's over and above the 800 and some units that we've identified.
Correct.
I had a question for the city attorney.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to make sure that expectations match what it is that we could be adopting here. And I'm looking at Section 2, imposition of the moratorium, and sorry if you've gone over this before, but I think people need to understand what would be regulated, and it talks about licensed residential care facilities and small and large family child care homes should be exempt. Can you kind of go over for us in terms of this web that we're casting, what rehab facilities are going to be kind of captured here?
As I discussed earlier, a residential use is a single-family use, which is people living together as a single housekeeping unit. The state law has identified these two facilities or operations for 6 or under as even though they're not living together necessarily as a single housekeeping unit, they're defined by state law as actually qualifying as a residential use. And the state law is very strict and says that a city cannot regulate or treat them any differently than a residential use. So those would be exempted, and they will be able to continue to, if they get a license from the alcohol drug program or from through the I'm forgetting the social services department for the large family daycare home that qualifies under either one of these exemptions, then they would be able to come in and establish. The city doesn't permit them anyway because we're not allowed to. What this wouldn't deal with would be sober living facilities that are not licensed, or new licensed facilities that are shown to operate not independently. They actually are receiving services from another facility, or are part of a total facility of more than 6, because in our estimation, if you are operating with more than 6, for instance, in a duplex above and below, then and you have gone to the ADP and said you want a license because you're going to work both of them together and you really have 12, then that would not qualify you for the 6 or under exemption. That's not the intent of the law. So those would also be within this moratorium, that they wouldn't be able to be established during that period. I do want to say that there are, I understand there are some pending applications for licensed facilities of 6 or under, and if they are operating as a independent sober living or residential treatment facility and licensed by ADP as such, then they will be able to go in.
Okay, so how you would treat applications in the pipeline then?
Correct.
Okay.
Councilman Henn. You know, I do regret that there is a moratorium on the table here from the standpoint that there is hardship associated with all the participants in this process to a greater or lesser degree. There's hardship for the homeowners that are enduring impacts from uses that are immediately adjacent to where they live. There's impacts on people that own homes or are thinking about buying homes here in Newport Beach and may hesitate because of the moratorium that we're putting in place. There may be impacts on the operators of the businesses here that are involved with group homes, as well as those businesses that rent short-term vacation lodging. I regret all of that. But we're here to deal with a serious issue, and we have to deal with it seriously. A 45-day period is, after all, not that long. I realize every day that goes by and every day that I get a little older that 45 days isn't very much time. I want us to use that time as wisely as possible and as diligently as possible to resolve the issues that are on the table tonight for all of the uses that have been mentioned. We need to gather all of these facts and sort them out to determine which uses, if any, deserve additional regulation and additional policies to deal with the impacts of these uses. Because we haven't got all of the facts that we need, we're introducing this moratorium. We should not limit the scope of this moratorium at this time. And I say that after careful consideration of all of the input. When we get all of the facts, we will determine which uses, if any, should be further regulated and how they should be further regulated. I personally am, and I am confident that all of the council members up here are seriously concerned with this problem and intend to address it to the fullest extent, supported by the facts that we generate. My sincerest hope is that we can find an expedited process to do this, that we can involve the necessary parties in this process, all of them, and arrive at an expedited understanding and solution to be put on the table where it's appropriate. I want to encourage everyone in this room to help us document the facts that are on the table here for impacts of these various uses. Help us, please, everyone. I know we've had several IROC meetings. There have been facts presented at those meetings. We need more facts. There apparently were a couple of people up here that had additional facts to share with us. I encourage you to share those facts, email, in writing, fax them, fax the facts, whatever. But let's get as many facts in as possible. Let's understand an expedited process. I believe if we do pass this ordinance this evening, that'll be the very first thing that we need to do, is establish an expedited process that allows for input from the stakeholders so that we can arrive at a conclusion as soon as possible. And so for all of those reasons, I intend to support this motion tonight and encourage my fellow council members to do the same.
Councilman, oh, change your mind. Anybody else that wants to speak towards this issue before we vote? I would request that Councilwoman Gardner modify her motion to include the board and care facilities that I mentioned earlier as also transitory use. And second on that. Second. And I'd also like to point out that this a vote of a moratorium requires 4/5 of the City Council to approve. And since there are 7 members, although even though Councilwoman Webb is not here tonight, that requires a minimum of 6 council members to approve of the moratorium, which means that tonight it would have to be unanimous. So just so everybody understands that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think we gave the indication to Mr. Rush when he was up here that we were going to deal with the process tonight, too. Is that not your intent or so? Because I think he left with the understanding we were going to talk about that.
Well, that may be, Bob. I guess it was my expectation that if we in fact pass this ordinance this evening, the very first thing that we should do beginning tomorrow is identify a process for all of the input.
Councilman Sos,
well, I think it's important that he. I just think it's important that he understand what's going to happen here.
Well, do you have a recommendation as to what process you'd like to see?
I think that before we leave tonight, that at least we should know who's going to be spearheading this effort as far as council. That would be helpful.
I have a couple suggestions. One would be to direct it to go back to the IROC committee. The other would be, and maybe might be something that some of the residents and the council might like, would be to direct that as soon as we come up with a draft based upon the facts that we receive and vet it at a planning commission study session. Not a planning commission hearing, but ask the planning commission to consider that and to have it publicized and provide it to everybody and have it vetted in front of the planning commission. Everybody give their input so that there can be direction from the planning commission on what their concerns and what the issues that come up that maybe are missed in the ordinance, and then give direction to the planning staff to come back with any kind of changes so that the next one would be actually a public hearing before the planning commission to start that process for review.
I do certainly agree that it needs to be a public process, and the Planning Commission, I used to be on the Planning Commission. I think it's a fine body. But with regard to input, I would also suggest, however, that you and others of us be receptive to input in the drafting process here, such that we get as many ideas before us about how this ordinance should be crafted as we are crafting it. I think we should take the first crack at drafting it and be receptive to whatever ideas are available as we're drafting, and then proceed with the public process. This is what I mean by expediting the process. I mean, I think the better we can gather good ideas as well as facts along the way here, I think we can speed things up. That's all I'm interested in.
I just have a quick question. How do you, and Robin, you can address this, or certainly Mike, if you have any ideas, or any of the council members. I mean, we're still looking for more factual information, I presume, to the extent that we can get it?
Well, we'll be doing that as far as our own study with, police records and other kind of planning studies that, the planning department, everybody has to do. That's the job of the planning department. And because there are legal fair housing issues, we have to review those decisions. We're also looking, we've already been given quite a few different cities that have adopted ordinances. People have indicated that, Irvine has a CUP process on these, and Murrieta, which may have some provisions in it that aren't discriminatory, but our legal counsel says some of them are. Costa Mesa has some provisions that I think might be worth looking at. So but the point is that the facts that the residents can help with the most is, number one, pointing out other areas and the way they think that those are working and why those are working well, so we can always look at that. And the other one is to identify the problem and to identify the situations where you have, I mean, it could be a rogue operator or a bad flop house. We do know that there's problems with some people setting up, say, a sober living facility, claiming they're sober living and not really being or operating that way. And those are things that we already know about and that we need to address in our regulations and also help with our code enforcement. So we're already aware of quite a bit of this, and I appreciate that, the residents will be providing us this information, but we've been doing quite a bit of research on it.
Okay. Robin, critical in the process to me is how long is it going to take you to get a draft out? Because I think that's going to determine what the process is. The longer it takes you to get the draft out, the more difficult the process is. So do you have an idea of how long it's going to be?
The direction is if we can do it and get a draft out for discussion in 30 days. And the reason why I picked 30 days is because, as Mr. Titus said, that we need to know in 30 days, because if there's more information or whatever.
How are you going to get it to the Planning Commission, get it to the public to review, and then get it back to us in another 15 days? That doesn't even seem possible.
No, I'm not saying that we're going to get it through and approved in 30 days. I'm saying that what we can get.
45 days.
I know. All we can get is for the public review is an ordinance.
I think what she's saying is at the end of 30 days, that she has to come back to us, and if we want to extend the moratorium, we have to, a report is presented and the reasons for extension of the moratorium for, I believe, 10 and a half months ultimately, and then there can even be another 1 year further extension past that.
Well, is that what we're trying to do, or are we trying to get this done in 45 days?
Well,
I think what she's telling us is that she's not going to be able to get it done in 45 days.
We're not going to have an approved ordinance in 45 days if we're going to have a lengthy public review process, and I think that's what we want. But I think in 30 days you will have an ordinance which everybody can look at and evaluate and decide whether that's going in the right direction, if that's going to solve the problems, what the issues are going to be, so that you could get a feeling for whether, as we go down the road, that that's something that's going to be able to be adopted and the residents are going to feel like it's going to work.
My goal would be, and I believe this is a very tight time frame as well, but my goal would be that we would have within 45 days an ordinance that we can present to the council for consideration.
So does that mean it's already gone through the Planning Commission and the public vetting process?
It will have to gone through, well, there's a public vetting process associated with the presentation of the ordinance for consideration. There will be time for input at that time, too.
But the public hearing process and the notices and the adoption of the ordinance, can't do it in 45 days.
Would the 30 days, what would you present to us, would that be able, do you think, to make the distinctions that we may want to make between the different uses?
Well, what we could do is maybe within 30 days we could come back to the council as part of the report that we're supposed to do to determine whether an ordinance is supposed to be, a moratorium would be extended, and we could present it to the council. And that would be the process by which the council could review the ordinance, The residents could review the ordinance, and the council could look at it and say, yeah, this is something that we want to go back through and go through the process, and then we'll know how long it's going to take to do that.
So in reality, we're really looking at a moratorium that's going to go out a year, or if we adopt an ordinance in a shorter period of time until the time that ordinance is adopted. That's what we're really looking at. We're not looking at a 45-day moratorium.
It just depends upon, you know, what your concerns are. Yes, that's one thing you're looking at, is for us to come back at the end of 30 days and say, this is how far we've gotten, this is the ordinance that we have, this is what we've presented, and depending upon how the residents and all the other community looks at that ordinance and says, yes, that's good, or no, it's not good enough, that's going to tell you whether we need to extend the moratorium or not.
But to be clear, we do not need, it's not a requirement that this ordinance exactly, or this moratorium exactly as it's presented tonight has to be either extended or not extended.
Correct.
We have the opportunity to modify the moratorium at that time based upon the facts that we
Or you have the ability to say, we don't need another moratorium, we're on a good process, we like the ordinance, we don't need it, because we know that in another 30 days, we're going to be able to get through the public process, and we'll come up with a good ordinance.
And
you won't even need another.
In the event that we did want to extend it, we don't have to extend it for 10.5 months, do we? I mean,
no.
So if we needed another 30 days or something, so it didn't have to be another year.
You could do that if you wanted. The process, though, for renewing a moratorium is lengthy and time-consuming. So that's why I would say I'd like to be able to get an ordinance back to you so that you can decide as part of that report and what the studies are, what the facts are, and what the information is that we've come up with in that short period of time. We'll give you the best shot we have with our planning staff. I mean, this is a big demand on planning staff and outside counsel. Because if I did it, I'd spend all my time on it.
You want something back for presentation to the council, you're really not talking about a public hearing, but just an ordinance in a format ready for public hearing, basically.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And maybe the most efficient way is to come back to the council with it.
We keep talking in terms of an ordinance. I can easily picture where there may be several solutions to the problems that are presented here. There may be more than one ordinance to be considered, and they don't have to all be considered immediately. But
well, that would be the outline of an approach. We could maybe have an ordinance with one approach to deal with maybe a more pressing issue, with an outline of an approach for other issues.
And to answer an earlier question, I think there is need for more factual gathering, because this moratorium has now identified a range of uses that may not have been really considered at the previous hearings. And so I do want to allow for the gathering of facts on the full range of uses here.
Which gets back to my question earlier. Are you anticipating more, and we keep saying facts, and you were talking about researching other cities and other laws and things. To me, that's more like legal research, or, that's not facts. When I say facts, are we looking to go back to the public to get more impact information in a public format?
No, I don't think so. I think that
So you feel comfortable that you have enough of that, at least as to, I know we did it as to the group home situation, but I mean, I know we really haven't done that as to the
If there are more
short-term.
facts to support, some of the concerns that have been raised may or may not be supported by facts. And so to the extent that the residents have facts to support their concerns, that helps in the city and in anybody else and in looking at addressing the problems. So it seems like every time we have a hearing like this, the residents, come up with something new or some more impact in a location. And, it's one thing to say that this is a problem because there's vans, but it might be helpful to know what are the vans and how many times are the vans driving around. And how does that impact the neighborhood to have vans driving around? It might be information. We had one person said to look at what are the calls, and we can do that from our own. What are the calls within the peninsula, and how are they broken down, and do they go to rental houses versus short-term lodging, and what are the DAC calls? That kind of information we can gather on our own. So it really is, to the extent the residents want to provide facts to support their concerns and why they're having problems with one use over another, depending upon what it is, they should provide that, and they can provide it any time they want. They don't need a public hearing, and we'll continue it and put it into the record and provide it as part of our ordinance.
All right, anybody else? Questions? All right, we have a motion as amended. Well, my understanding from legal counsel, our legal counsel, is that we need 6.
It's 4/5. 4/5 of 7 is 6.
I'm not going to debate it. Please vote.
Motion carries.
Okay, now we'll get back on track with our agenda. Moving to item number 18, council consideration of draft priority goals for the community in fiscal year 2007 and 2008. Take a minute until the room clears. Huh? Actually, why don't we just take a quick 5-minute break?
Now we know where the real power
I can't,
is now.
there we go. Thank you, Vaughn. Okay, we have reconvened, and we are going to tackle issue, or agenda item number 18, City Council consideration of draft priority goals for the community in fiscal year 2007-2008. Do we have a staff report?
We do have the staff report. The question is how much of a staff report you want.
Very little, as far as I'm concerned.
I am prepared to go through each of the 11 priorities. And Mr. Mayor, what the staff has done is try and pick out some obvious key action points that would have to be accomplished and put some realistic timeframes to them. Identify some of the potential issues, not that are necessarily fatal flaws, but issues that could come into play. They might not come into play. We might have to deal with them. Just in order to be aware of them is the only reason why they're listed. So maybe what I should do is just, if you want me to go through the PowerPoint very quickly for the people who are watching on TV, I'll be glad to do that. But I'm looking to you as to how much of a report you want or how you want this discussion to go.
Okay, I think the mood of the council at this point in time, even though it's not even really that late, guys. I mean, I've spent date nights here at 1:30.
Well, it was an exhausting.
I think we'll dispense with the PowerPoint. I just actually have one question. I see here on provide more public parks priority that Sunset Ridge Park conceptual development doesn't begin until August 2008, which is over a year from now. I would hope that that's not the case. I've actually sent an email to Wes Morgan a week ago or so saying, when are we going to get this process rolling? I think we started at one time, then kind of got aborted when we were having problems with acquisition of the property. We finalized that probably 6 months ago, and we own it now. I think we need to get going on it.
Mr. Mayor, that is a mistake. It should say January, March of 2000. Okay.
Don't say 2009.
Yeah.
Say oops. Say oops. And
the mind is going blank. We can do it sooner than
say
that.
we'll fix that problem.
Yes, we will.
Thank you. Yeah, because we've been waiting a long time to get that park going. We finally acquired it, the site. I see no reason to wait over a year and a half to start conceptual development. I mean, I think we pretty much have an idea that it's going to be an active park with some ball fields and things. I think we passed that conceptual development, and now we need to kind of get into actual development.
Well, I think the conceptual development, just my opinion, needs to be revisited. I think there are some different players in order to do it right. Oh, Steve, you're chomping at the bit here.
We do have a consultant on board all ready to go.
I know. I think we signed a contract and
we signed a
budgeted
contract,
money.
but we stopped them because we didn't actually own the property.
Right.
So I guess now is the time to restart that. And it was really conceptual development, and it also involved a lot of public outreach to see what would be in that
when
park.
I'm saying that we've decided, I agree that there will be meetings with the public. We will be bringing them along with the process, but I don't see why we need to wait until August of 2008 to do that.
Just a quick question, Steve. Do we need to refresh then that contract, or is it still good?
I think we probably need to touch bases with the consultant to make sure that the
just add 20% onto it. I'm sure that's what we're looking at here.
Over a year ago, so it's probably.
All right. Well, regardless, it doesn't take until August of 2008 to make those overtures and bring it back to council, and I would hope that we can expedite it, since that park is the one park that we're going to be building that's going to be at least solving a problem in town when it comes to active ball fields.
We can certainly do that. I think what that one shows, though, more than anything, is that there will be a lot of balls in the air at the same time, and the key is going to be
no pun intended.
No, okay. How much time staff is going to be able to devote to public outreach and all of the myriad of issues that are going to be needed for all of these facilities, of which there are numerous.
Yeah, maybe we should set some priorities. All right, that was my one comment. Is there any other comments?
No, I just thought this was very helpful. And I thought staff did a good job of particularly identifying some of the issues that we'll have to deal with.
Mr. Mayor, it was my intent in my next city manager newsletter, I was waiting for this discussion to take place, was basically to make these 11 priorities a point of discussion of the newsletter and invite the community to comment back on them. But now to start the outreach and make sure the community knows what the council is looking at as far as your priorities.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I did have two other quick comments.
Yes, go ahead.
On the goal for developing an efficient traffic management plan and begin implementation, it seems like the things that we've got here are all to do with traffic light synchronization, but my understanding was that that goal was wider than that and should include roadway and intersection improvements, unless we feel like that's adequately addressed elsewhere, and if it is, I didn't see it. So I have a concern about that, because to me that's also an important part of addressing traffic.
Steve, could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think I could. Yeah, as part of, the other, one of the other goals that we have, or priorities that we have, also shows establishing that traffic impact fee. And in order to generate monies to fix those intersections that are identified in the general plan, I guess there's like 18 intersections that we identified that need things like extra turn pockets and straight through lanes and these kinds of things. And I guess those are tough to kind of judge. You typically want to do those intersections as we accumulate fees and as we see traffic increasing at those intersections. So the timing of all of those might be more, I guess, a function of where the development is occurring and where we're seeing traffic levels rise, because we'd like to stay ahead of, hopefully stay ahead of the congestion and be able to build these improvements in a timely manner so they don't cause a problem. I don't know how we would prioritize those 18 intersections otherwise.
Was it our intent, though, only to fund those through the collection of impact fees? I mean, I was thinking that we were going to address those.
Well, maybe I
through
missed.
other means as well.
Maybe I missed this one because it probably boils down to what the definition of a traffic management plan is. I think most of our discussion was talking about, the new technology that was going into our new traffic management plan, how it was going to be, at least initially, located in this City Hall and then relocated someplace else. But I think most of the discussion was then about the traffic synchronization and signalization. And if you want it to be broader than that, I think we can. I think what I hear Steve saying, though, is that it's going to be hard to put dates and timeframes to that because it is dependent on certain funding, that we only are collecting fees for those purposes.
I know, but my concern is that we've set up an expectation in that general plan by having identified 18 specific projects and lacking even a plan or a prioritization of that rings a little hollow, So I guess I defer to my other council members here. I mean, that's...
Well, a lot of the deficiencies of those intersections are going to come about as a result of some of the development in the general plan, and we have no idea which areas are going to come first. So right now, I don't see how we'd be prioritizing because we don't know who's going to be coming in the door first. I think what Steve's talking about doing is that we got to go out and define what the improvements are, cost them out, and use them as a basis for setting up a fee structure that as new development comes in, we're collecting the fees to do the improvements. Because those improvements are primarily created by the development that's we approved in the new general plan.
Well, and I wouldn't mind at least illuminating that idea in this goal here so that we can, we've got some placeholder here for the addressing of that.
Well, I just took it that we're developing an efficient traffic management plan and beginning our implementation. Well, our beginning is with this traffic synchronization, but that doesn't limit us. And we would be adding things to all of these as we go along. I mean, this is not the final list of everything that we're going to be doing for the next 10 years because it's always going to be fluid and changing.
Well, I'd be happy if we just at least identified the fact that, as development occurs and we will be putting together an impact fee structure that'll enable us to deal with roadway and intersection improvement. I just think it would be good to know.
Maybe we can assign a certain date to come up with it. There is a date on the traffic impact. Oh, there is on the general plan. Sharon is saying there is one. Would you go ahead and address that?
And it's just on the opposite page on the general plan. It's August 28th is the target date for City Council adoption of the updated fair share fee.
So we can also fold that one in this one.
Okay. On the Institute organizational performance improvement effort, I guess I had a similar concern as Steve expressed on the park, that if we're going to complete this process by February of 2008, we're probably too late to really have much impact on the next year's budget cycle. My hope was to, that we could produce recommendations out of here that'll give us some guidance on the budget cycle following year.
And I think we can do that with this schedule. I don't think it is too late. We began the budget process in January or so, but the departments don't submit their budgets until the end of February. And even after they submit them, there's some time for us to do some adjusting. So I put this time frame in there just because I thought it would help us with the next budget preparation.
Okay, anybody else that has tweaks to the schedule? All right, so you're looking for us to approve the priorities as set forth?
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that there's a consensus that this pretty well captures what the City Council did talk about as far as your top-tier priorities. I will kind of engage the public in a discussion just by virtue of the newsletter. And if there's any significant comments that comes back, I'll bring them back to the City Council. But staff will see that these are your priorities, and we will begin to try and do our best to meet those dates. But I think, as Councilwoman Gardner pointed out, these are very fluid. I mean, there could be things that we don't even have an idea that will become issues. So it's going to be something that I think we need to come back to Council with at least every 6 months and with a status report, and so you can massage these as you see fit.
Could we have these on the webpage someplace?
That's a good idea.
The only change I might suggest is under water quality or bays, ocean, and drinking water. It talks about establishing a water master plan and initiates rate adjustment process. And I don't want it to be presented to citizens that that's a done deal. I mean, I think that's something maybe instead of approves, council considers, maybe a little softer language on that.
Are you planning on, in your newsletter, publishing all these other things or just the priorities?
Just the priorities, not all of the dates and not all of the steps, but maybe just a little summary of what they would entail.
Okay.
Something that would fit on 4 pages, so not all of this detail.
Good.
Certainly would. But we can make that change. I understand what you're saying.
All right, so I guess I need a motion here.
So moved.
No, it's actually not. That's what I was looking at. It's, council needs to make whatever collective changes, if any, it's comfortable with in determining the realistic council priority goals for the next 12 months. So
I think a motion would be in order.
to adopt,
Yes.
well, why don't we clarify what the motion is? A motion to adopt the priorities here is the council's priorities for the next 12 months?
The priorities and preliminary action plans that are identified.
Well, with the correction to the Sunset Ridge Park. Timing.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you.
Motion carries.
All right, item number 19 is appointment by the mayor of Ad hoc Appointments Committee to review applications and make recommendations to the full council for the board and commission vacancies scheduled to occur on June 30th, 2007. I've asked, I'll be appointing myself, and I've asked Councilman Selich and Councilman Henn to join me. So those are my recommendations, and that's the motion that I'll make.
Second.
Public comment? Actually, we never had public comment the last time. Seeing no one, please vote.
Motion carries.
Motions for reconsideration?
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the city council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Anybody making a motion for reconsideration? Anybody want to reconsider our vote on the moratorium? No? Come on, guys. No? Everybody left? Okay. We're adjourned. Thank you.